Yeah, we're live now. Hello, people. Today here at Freebird Media Canada, we have me, Fanny Anzai, interviewing Tim Moen. Tim Moen is the leader of Libertarian Party in Canada. Thank you very much, Tim, for coming.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I should correct you. I am not the leader anymore. I stepped down last August, but still heavily involved in the libertarian community. Just I got to pay bill. A guy can't, do volunteer work the rest of his life. So back to work full time now.
Thank you very much for coming. And yes, please tell us a little bit about those news. We have not talked since before. and you stepped down. How is the Libertarian Party coming? Who is the new leader? And we're going to go through the news.
Sure. Yeah. No, I stepped down in August. I just realized I don't have the time and energy to put into the party. The party deserves a full-time leader, someone who can, who can devote a lot of time and energy to advancing this important cause. So I stepped down to make way for someone else. And I think 4 or 5 people ran for leadership after I stepped down. And the current leader is a fellow named Jacques Boudreau, who is a retired, I think he's an accountant or something like that, but very strong, especially on the economic portfolio. So he's a very strong principled libertarian. Hopefully one day maybe you'll interview Jacques and hear what he has to say.
I would love to, for sure. So it's me and Alex, we always like talking to you. And Alex, now bringing me on live streams have been like very challenging towards libertarianism, and curious, so far about, for example, what he mentioned, child labor laws, and we have a bunch of subjects that we want to cover for people to get more familiarized with what libertarianism is. I think for many people, the political compass is still some flat left right, and they don't see much of the authoritarian libertarian axis, which is a very important subject all around the world. But right now in Canada, we have gone through the Freedom Convoy, Trudeau emergency calls. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts, a little bit about libertarianism, and what's going on here for people that have not been aware of Canada situation?
Man, okay.
Canadian
Well, I
situation.
mean, Canada has been absolutely atrocious, from day one with the COVID pandemic. And, it's a common trope that if there's an emergency, government must solve the emergency. We need to use this cartel that uses violence to solve problems, to solve every damn problem in the world. And pandemics, whether it's pandemics, global warming, children working, whatever the case may be. I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit, that we need this cartel to solve it. And so I think there was widespread support right from the hop. In fact, Aaron O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party, didn't think the government was acting strongly enough when the pandemic started. And I remember when he was running for leadership, he said, we need to put Canada on a war footing. In fact, he was alluding to the War Measures Act, or the Emergencies Act, and making noises about how we need to use these extraordinary government powers to marshal resources and coordinate efforts to deal with this pandemic. So, even the opposition party was as bad, or in O'Toole's case, maybe even worse than the ruling party, the Liberals, and Justin Trudeau, who's terrible in and of himself. So there was no real opposition to any of these, any of the measures that the government brought in. So, most of the, I guess, mandates that people complain about and that we're kind of oppressed by are done at the provincial level. But all the provinces seem to have gone in lockstep together. And they go along with whatever the establishment narrative is, right? The corporate media, the establishment media puts out a narrative, and the governments provincially seem to in lockstep adopt that and lock down businesses, restrict travel, tell people to wear face coverings, mandate vaccines. The amount of business that has been crushed by government over the past years. Just, you know, go around your local community and see how many businesses have been absolutely destroyed by these lockdowns and by these pandemic measures. And the businesses that are thriving, these large connected corporations, you know, one might describe them as oligopolies, have made out like bandits. Your Amazons, your Googles, your you know, all these giant, well-connected organizations have managed to stay open and managed to collect a bigger market share because of these government impositions. And then on top of this, you add government making people less productive by essentially prohibiting work. And in order to overcome that, now they have to print all this money. And so now we're just starting to see inflation. The official numbers, the government numbers are, you know, 5%, but that's based on a bogus kind of CPI, consumer price index basket of goods. It doesn't take into account your basic essentials that fluctuate very wildly. They're very volatile. Anyone who's gone to fill up with gas or gone to the grocery store or rented or bought a place recently, built something, you know that inflation is much higher than 5%. It's probably closer to 20%. You know, actually, we printed 30% more money last year, just in 1 year.
I just saw that gas hit 186 yesterday
Yeah.
or so, and I was like, wow.
Right. Right. And so, you know, of course, they have this convenient crisis in Ukraine to blame for inflation and the reason you're paying more at the pump and all these different things. They can distract us away from the policies that, you know, libertarians have been warning for, well, even longer than 2 years. But in the last 2 years, all the things that we've been pushing back on for decades, they just ramped up on steroids. So essentially what we have now with this COVID regime is, you know, one of the largest wealth transfers in the world from the lower and middle classes to the ruling elite and the establishment classes. And, you know, people are just starting to feel the pain, really. I mean, we've felt the pain for 2 years, but we're really going to start to feel the pain. Closer to home, you know, I work for a fire department, and I found out a few of our members who were refusing to get vaccinated despite a provincial mandate. And so, and then I found out there's a bunch of other firefighters in the province facing this, and healthcare workers. So I started an organization called Fight for the Front Line, which is allows the public to support frontline workers and help them get back to work. And, you know, we lobbied the government, raised $100,000, hired a constitutional lawyer, took the fight to AHS, and we actually had some success. We got the government, we got the health minister, based on a letter writing campaign and a bunch of public pressure, to order our Alberta Health Services, our provincial health body, to bring our guys back to work. So this has taken up an extraordinary amount of time and effort just to fight back against this regime, to get some semblance of a normal life back. And so on top of all of the spending and the oppression and all these things, just the opportunity cost alone, like the amount of energy I spent defending our guys, I could have invested in 1,000 other things that would have been personally gratifying and built me up and, you know, helped the community and different things like that. But I had to devote my energy just to holding the line to keep my brothers from being, you know, obliviated by these crazy mandates. So
That's really good. Yeah, this is a good question. The Freedom Convoy and Trudeau situation here. Do you think I feel like the fight, we're kind of losing the fight for freedom because we're all fighting lonely, like isolated fights. For example, I've noticed atheist groups fighting for some type of equality before the law, as because there are religious groups that can claim religious freedom to not take the vaccines and then get the exemption, while secularly speaking, we atheists don't have that card to play. oh, I have religious freedom, so
Yeah,
I don't want to get vaccinated. And then I saw atheist groups moving actions, trying to fight for some type of equality
sure.
in in the law, okay,
Right,
before a
right.
judge, and say like, hey, why can I not claim I have? It could be even like my secular religions, let's say, if it needs to be a religious freedom.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the firefighters fight, do you think the truckers managed to bring out, maybe even because of they're more into that more communistic, more uh, uh, union type of behavior, they managed to organize and do the freedom convoy, which we should have be started the fight much before as humans, or as people, as you know, as
Yeah.
libertarians as we are.
Okay.
And,
So
and
the
we still have
first,
some hope. What do
right.
you think?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot there. I'll start with the first thing about the religious exemptions and
Yeah.
versus atheists and stuff like that. So this idea of having a religious exemption that allows you uh, different freedoms, then I think that's frankly bullshit, right? I mean, if you don't want to be coerced or forced to take a jab, you shouldn't have to believe in a supernatural entity and have a strong conviction to do that. Unfortunately, it's entrenched in our charter and in Canadian case law. The Constitution, there was a constitutional case called, I think it was Anselm, and in that case, the judge said that you can have a religious exemption if your belief is sincerely held, and if it is. It just has to have a parallel to a religion. It doesn't, your church doesn't have to have doctrine. So I got very good at writing religious exemptions for a lot of the people I was defending over the last 6 months or so, and became very versed in what works and what doesn't. And we could talk about religious exemptions just for an hour about what can work and what can't. But just the fact that I was having to do this was nonsense. But those are the tools at our disposal, and the immediate threat was, and the immediate tool to get our guys back to work. So we used the religious exemptions. But of course, it should be up to the individual whether they want to be vaxxed or not. And I think I see some questions in the
Yeah, I
chat
like
here.
this one. It's pretty good. This Ace Wald, thank you very much for the question. In the case of an extremely contagious and fatal pandemic, unlike the one we came out of, does the government have a right to enforce vaccinations? What do you think?
Right. Yeah, so I've written about this somewhat extensively on my blog. If you go to timmoen.net, you can read some of my writings in there. What we have a right to do. Government has a right to do what an individual has a right to do, right? And so when can an individual use force and force someone to be vaccinated? Well, um, if I own a house and I have an immunocompromised person in the house, I can tell you, look, you can't come on my property unless you're vaccinated. That's the rules. But what I can't do is go to your house and say that you must be vaccinated in your house. I can't go to someone's business and say that you must operate vaccination full. So it's up to the individuals to manage their own risk. And so what we do have a right to do is say, okay, if you are contagious, if you have a contagious vector, you can't go into a public space. Maybe you can't even leave your home, and we can quarantine you. Okay, but there has to be some evidence of contagion. I can't just say, well, it's possible that you might be contagious, therefore I can quarantine you. And that's what people are saying with the vaccine debate. They're saying that first of all, there's a possibility you could be contagious. Well, where's your evidence of that? Where's your evidence that someone's contagious? So someone needs to show some signs. You have to have some evidence that they're contagious before you can use force against them, right? It's just like I can't punch someone in the face and say, well, this person is bigger than me, and he trains MMA, and therefore he's a danger because he could beat me up if he wants to. He has the ability, the capacity to beat me up, right? So the argument here is that essentially unless you're a bilateral amputee who can't throw a punch, you could potentially throw a punch. Therefore, you can't operate in society unless we amputate you. Well, no, there has to be some evidence that you're going to commit violence, that you're an actual threat before I can use force to restrain you. And so that's the way I look at vaccines. It's a private property issue. It's an individual risk issue. I have no issue. You know, if someone is carrying a contagious pathogen, then certainly they can be banned from public spaces and quarantined. And you can use force to do that because they represent danger to people around them. In terms of during a deadly pandemic, individual institutions ought to manage their own risk, right? So each institution ought to manage their own risk. And whether you're vaccinated, you know, maybe vaccine requirements are part of managing that risk, but just to impose a blanket vaccination requirement on the general population is wrong-headed.
Yes, I think we've talked about this before in other conversation, and I think we've agreed that the government should always save their like they could give as recommendation, not as a mandate, because I think with the libertarians position is because we have a lot of hope, you know, and trust in humanity, that we expect people to do the right thing before they need to be forced to do. I would say that in the case of a fatal pandemic, imagine if it was more of a Ebola pandemic, and that what I think is like, do you think the government would have the right to do that? I think no, the government would never have the right to overcome the individual freedom, medical privacy, and choice. And in the point, because if I believe the Ebola was a pandemic right now, I personally would be like, right, okay, guys, let's make a vaccine. I'm going to wrap myself in plastic. And when I go outside, I'll put masks. My daughter will have masks. Other people, we individuals would have that, you know,
right,
measure of protecting the self-defense that is completely natural, biological. So much what I would like to bring, because the fear mongering about the disease was so strong that you see that many places are not required masks, or they still publicly saying masks are mandated, you know, so it's mandatory.
Well, and one of the question, you know, a lot of people would say
wear all the time. Some people wear masks in their cars all alone.
Yeah.
Which shows
I mean,
it's really convinced people.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a lot of psychological manipulation and propaganda going on out there. And, you know, people couldn't think for themselves. Right. And you know, I faced this question early on in the pandemic when there was a lot of fear mongering going on. We didn't have a vaccine. We didn't know a lot about the virus. I was an essential worker. I'm a firefighter paramedic. So I'm a healthcare worker. And I had a lot of people saying, well, we need to shut things down. We need to shut down society because science. And I said, okay, what scientific facts would justify prohibiting me from going to work? Like, how dangerous does this have to be? Well, I think I have to reserve the right to know, like, if this pandemic, if this virus were sufficiently dangerous and there wasn't a lot of protection against it, and there was no vaccine for it, I might quit my job. I might not go to work because you're asking me as part of my job to walk into heavy viral loads and deal with sick people who are, you know, infected, you know, so I'm going to have to determine the risk for myself. During the COVID pandemic, you know, all this fear mongering going on. And I would ask people, well, do you think it's so dangerous that I should stay home from work? Because I'm expected to go face to face with COVID positive patients and help them and treat them. So what are you saying for me? Are you saying it's too dangerous for me to go to work? Well, no, we're not saying that. Well, okay. So you want me to go to work, but you don't want the movie theater to open. Yeah, I want to go see a movie, but I can't do that. But you want healthcare, so therefore I need to go to work. So, you know, people just couldn't think for themselves. And so again, it comes down to individual risk mitigation. I looked at it and I'm like, I don't know how dangerous this thing is. I'm seeing some disturbing images coming out of China. Remember bodies laying in the street, the Chinese government doing things that looked like it could be really bad. But I was like, man, the risk of unemployment is pretty bad too. So I've got these two risks: unemployment, or just confronting this head on and trusting that I can manage the risk. And so I chose to manage the risk myself. And I just want individuals to reserve the right to manage their own risk.
How did you
Yeah.
manage your risk in the beginning? Did you take the vaccine, or you were just wearing masks? Did you yourself get COVID?
Yeah, I eventually got COVID. We have high quality masks, N95s, that are properly fitted with a respiratory occupational health and safety person, and we get those fitted every year because our face changes, and we're trained in proper donning and doffing of PPE. So I felt fairly safe with the masks we had. I certainly didn't feel safe with public masking. I knew public masking would do absolutely nothing because you could see people wearing these chin diapers, and I'd put a mask on my patient because it was required, and there'd be snot dripping down the outside, and they'd be pulling it down so they can breathe, and they'd be rubbing their face. It was almost like making it worse by putting masks.
This is
Yeah.
interesting you bring up, because I had a conversation with Tyrone Wills, which he actually works in a company that produces masks, so he understands all the technology, the fibers, the pores. We talked in the beginning how the masks were not protective at all, that therefore would not make any sense to mandate them. The same thing with the vaccines, only mandate if they are actually efficient. And in the beginning, my hypothesis was, okay, I fear that the wearing masks for laymen that they're not used, they end up touching their face, their masks end up collecting more of the whatever bad thing they should not be breathing, just very close to the breathing, the nose and the mouth. So the same way I see some people that really use the mask and that thing is super contaminated, needs to go to the garbage, there are people that collect those masks and they reuse that over and over, which might not be good for them in the end.
Right.
So
and the public messaging put out was that masking works, right? And so if masking works, that means if I wear a mask out in public, I'll be protected from the virus, right? So, but the people wear these basically what amounts to cheesecloths in front of their face, and they think they're being safe and they're protected and they're protecting others. And I've had a number of patients who said, I remember I had one lady who was about 400 pounds, who was type 2 diabetic, who had bad COVID. Her oxygen sats were in the dump. This lady probably died. And she's like, I don't understand. I followed everything they told me. I when I went out, I wore a mask, and she showed me her cheesecloth mask. And so they gave people this impression that these things would protect you from the virus when they wouldn't. And if you were immune compromised, or if you had all these comorbidities, you should have stayed home and avoided the virus as much as possible, knowing that these masks aren't going to do anything. And if you're healthy, know that, look, you're exposing yourself to risk when you go out. And if you're okay with that risk, give her, no one should stop you.
Yeah.
And masks, by the way, probably aren't going to do a damn thing to help you or anyone else.
I think the one part of the problem is that they confused people, saying masks are protective, wear them, force them to other people, but they are not protective, so you need to force on other people.
Right.
So yesterday was an interesting, because it was the first time I had some more or that I noticed some hatred coming towards me, because I don't wear masks anywhere I go. Some people ask me to wear, and I say no. Some people ask what is my exemption, and I say I'm a physician.
Right.
I don't like to play the doctor card, but I have been forced to do that. And when they insist, I say look, I understand you're just an employee here and you just following rules. Give me like you said, give me the chin diaper, and I'll carry it on my chin. Because I'm not going to wear this contaminated cloth that you guys keep touching and passing to people, because this is not protected. I honestly feel that I start dripping. My nose start dripping as soon as I put the mask, start breathing inside that shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very convinced that it's definitely something negative for people that have allergies, rhinitis
Yeah.
or any type of allergy, because you breathe in that same air and collecting whatever in there and reusing, which many people do.
Yeah.
Uh, I I was in the public, so all the thing is the brainwash that I feel is because it's like mass mandatory
Yeah.
everywhere you go, public place. Okay, I don't wear the mask. Never had anybody telling me to do it, and I would say like just fuck off. If you're really
Right.
afraid of me not wearing mask, you should not be talking to me. Go
Yeah.
away, stay away.
Well,
That's
it's interesting now. It's interesting now in Alberta.
everybody else has the masks, which is scary.
Yeah.
Even when they
Well,
put masks
people are
are just
complying.
recommended, people still wearing the mask. That's why I feel that the brainwash was that deep and scary, that
Well,
level.
and I'll tell you how deep the brainwashing is, because we're in Alberta now, where they've lifted the mask mandates, and the Kenny government is actually imposing Ron DeSantis like legislation to ban all municipalities and cities from imposing their own mask mandates, because he wants to have a consistent message. So in Alberta, the mask ban has been lifted. And, I went to a local grocery store yesterday and noticed that probably 80% of the people still wearing masks. And, I asked someone later about it, and someone I know, because I ran into him at the grocery store, and she's like, yeah, I know. I don't have to wear this, but I feel like I kind of feel like a criminal or dirty if I don't. I don't want to wear it, but I'm worried about what people are going to think of me. And, it's just, we've got people so
Many
trained now.
levels. There are the people
Yeah.
that are hysterical because the mandates are being lifted and they really think it's necessary. So they will probably wear 2 masks now because other people are not wearing theirs. Okay. There are the people that just don't want to be judged as like, oh, I don't want people to think I don't care about other people's health, so I'm going to wear the mask. Okay.
Right.
And of course, there are people that are just like, no, you're gonna have to tell them like, hey, you really don't need to wear the mask anymore, or most of people not be wearing the mask for them to follow, which might be the majority.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's gonna be slower to come out than what we spend to come in, and those are years by now. So it's pessimistic. I'm not wearing the mask for quite a long time now. Most of the time I have headphones, I'm listening to audiobooks, so maybe people are talking shit, but unless they go and not like touch me and
Yeah.
tell me to wear the mask, I'm probably gonna not say anything or notice. Yesterday I entered this the SkyTrain to Vancouver, and I sit usually alone in the front or in the back, and I was at the back, really in the last seat, and there was this couple. They came and sat after me, and the lady could not rest. She was so annoyed, so with me not wearing the mask. I
Mm-hmm.
noticed because she couldn't stop like
Right.
her 40, maybe 40 something. And interesting because she was speaking quite loud, I guess, for me to try to hear and maybe interact back, but
Right.
unless she talks direct to me, I would never turn and like, what the fuck, bitch, whatever,
Now, why do you think she was triggered? Do you think she was
She
triggered
was
because she was
triggered because
worried
I
you were going to
didn't
get
have the
COVID, or
mask.
because you weren't
Clearly,
complying?
clearly, she was triggered by me not having the mask.
Okay,
As
but
soon as
what
she
about the
entered and she
mask?
sat and she looked sideways, and I was sitting
Yeah.
there just without the mask. She looked and said, "What?
Yeah.
She doesn't have the mask," and I could hear
Yeah.
that. And she even mentioned like, "I can't deal with my 3 years old, but adults." Like that kids don't
Yeah.
want to
She's
wear
making
masks, but
comments,
adults
passive
don't
aggressive
want to
comments.
wear
Sure.
masks. You know?
Yeah.
So I was just like kind of like listening with here and there. And actually I got from the conversation, the guy was trying to calm her down, saying like, I just wear it. I let people do whatever, like being cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were actually kind of like from different places. So I think he's Canadian. She might be American. She's here traveling. Guess what?
Right.
Touristically with her mask, traveling. So you see people going to work without mask, and I thought it was a curious situation because I was expecting to, her to like touch me or say something else. Like, if you're really that scared of you wearing a mask and not, you should be walking to the other point of the train, not trying to talk to me, because
Yeah.
you're running a risk. Or else your mask is that protective and you don't need to worry about me not wearing one. No, it's always
Right.
comes to the mask and the vaccines. If they are protective, you take yours, you put yours, and you don't care about your neighbor because you're protected.
Right. Well, and I would argue that she wasn't upset. She wasn't worried about getting COVID from you so much as she was upset that you weren't following the rules, right? And so this is what the government has done. It's divided us, and the people who aren't following the rules are a danger to society. They're the reason you don't have freedoms. This is classic slave on slave violence or slave on slave division, right? You know, what you would do if you were running a slave plantation, let's say, is you would dish out a punishment to everyone for those slaves being disobedient. If those slaves are disobedient, that's why everyone is getting an extra 40 lashes today. It's their fault, right? And then the slaves aren't mad at the master. They're mad at those two disobedient slaves over there that weren't pulling their weight or weren't following the rules or whatever. So this is what the government does to us. It's like your liberties are restricted because these anti-vax, non-mask wearing nutters are spreading this virus everywhere. And so, of course, we have to punish you and lock you down
Yeah,
because
they
of these
still carry on
irresponsible
that.
people. And so they painted you as a target now, Fanny, and you are you are visibly showing that you're a target by your act of civil disobedience of not wearing a mask, right? And so that this is what the government has trained them to do, to be mad at you, to hate you. And it serves them and it serves the government, because as we hate each other, they get more power, they get more wealth, they get more entrenched.
For sure. That is definitely part of the plan, I guess. With this, I'll put the neighbors to police each other. I don't need to put agents to contract anybody. And that way, public shaming, they maybe will do what I want. The ones that are dissent, because those are the minority. So they think they can just crush, just like the Freedom Convoy. And it's like, oh, if they dissent, because they still carry on that narrative of we could have eradicated this disease if everybody had lockdown, if everybody
Yeah.
is that unachievable goal, and that
No.
that
Yeah, of course it wasn't
imaginary
achievable. It was
enemy
never achievable.
that we
Yeah.
will always have to be here is sometimes we libertarians believe that this is the role of the government, of course, to try to keep itself alive, as any other organism. But the idea of like, look, I need to show you that my need, so here I'm managing your health. And we libertarians know, wait a minute, we understand, we believe there's a lot of things that can become can be just in this personal level, and the government has nothing to do. And that's one of the things I think we should maybe approach, because Alex and has been challenging me with like challenging my libertarianism, to see how far libertarian I am. And
Sure.
we're gonna do this today with you,
Okay. Yeah.
bring
Excellent.
some topics to see, in general. Of course, we want to see what you would talk about abortion, gun control. But before that, because we are coming from in Canada, Freedom Convoy, emergency call, Trudeau kind of becoming fascist,
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest. The emergency call, all the behavior that he had towards the Freedom Convoy was very Hitler-like. This is not trying to add on in here or demonize him, but it's because he was not disavowed by the mainstream media or anybody big. It scared me enough to see maybe he's going down that road. And then we had the Ukrainian Russian war starting, which for me is really sad. Of course, we don't. I believe we're both very on the non-aggressive aggression principles. But now we have to do something, or what to do. And I want to talk about those two things before we.
Sure.
What do you think about those international affairs and the wars? And do you agree with me that sadly, this Ukrainian war kind of like, um, switch the attention to Europe, and people kind of forget again Canada. And
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, this is, this is how the media kind of works, right? And it's convenient. I mean, I could see where a conspiracy theorist might say that this Ukrainian crisis came at just an opportune time because public opinion was turning away from this fear porn about the COVID pandemic, and public sentiment is largely in Canada. I think it's like 60% of people think we should open up and get rid of these restrictions. People are tired of it. And so this, it was going to be climate change or war was going to be the next crisis that the media pumped up. This is it. Now, I'm not saying that this was all planned or anything like this by some cabal of puppet masters, but it's no coincidence, let's say, that the pundits are blaming inflation on the Ukraine crisis and blaming all these things on, right before that it was the truckers, right? Truckers were causing inflation, and now it's this one. Anything to divert away from
empty everywhere,
right?
When the Freedom Convoy started, but then later they tried to flip the timing when they start blaming the truckers and the Freedom Convoy for having the shelves empty. And we're like, no, that is because of the COVID. Many people are not working. The factories, the companies are completely empty. They cannot keep running. And we expected that the shelves would be empty at some point. So now they are doing the same thing and using probably a lot of emotional propaganda.
Sure. It's distraction. It's distracting from again,
convince people to go to war.
Anything that the establishment puts out is going to support this idea that government solves all the problems and that these crises cause all the problems, right? And so that bolsters their power. If everyone knew that the government caused the pain we're suffering right now with the gas prices, with the food prices, with the everyday living, even with the lockdowns, right? The government didn't cause that. You caused that, Fanny, by not wearing a mask. You irresponsible anti-vaxxers, you. So government shifts blame and then takes credit for responsibility. I don't know if you want to get to the Ukraine crisis now. Alex is asking the question if Canadians should be concerned about Trudeau's relationship with the World Economic Forum. Maybe I'll take that first, because it kind of is in line with what we're talking about. And yes, of course, we should be concerned with that. I read The Great Reset, Klaus Schwab's manifesto there about leveraging this crisis to, usher in a new global world almost governance system of green economy and abolishing inequalities and different things like that. It's neo-Marxism essentially. And this is what our elite buy into, right? They want to set up a global governance system. And I have no doubt that whatever comes of this Ukrainian crisis, it's going to spur this agenda forward as well, right? Because, what would be better for, international peace than having a global government overseeing all these things, playing peacemaker, making sure no one can get into this under, of course, the watchful eye of progressives like the empathetic Klaus Schwab and the Justin Trudeau's with those doughy puppy dog eyes, who cares so deeply when he looks in my eyes and I can feel him. He touches the depths of my soul. I mean, these are the people we want in charge of the world after all, right? The Greta Thunbergs, so it's not necessarily the relationship that Trudeau has with the World Economic Forum in and of itself that's problematic, but it's what it signals. It signals where his mind's at. It signals that all these people are on the same page, playing off the same playbook. And it's the narrative that needs to be addressed. It's that, and it's people's willingness to just consume whatever the establishment media feeds it without question, and just parrot back those talking points. Like 10 minutes after people were epidemiological experts, they became experts in Ukraine-Russian relations, right? And had very strong opinions about it. And well, look, nukes are in play now, so be careful what you opine for, because normally your opinion just gets other people killed. when it comes to foreign policy, but when nukes are in play, your opinion could actually get you killed this time. So be very careful armchair quarterbacking this one. If you think you know, you probably don't know, and you probably should just zip your lips and stay out of it. But
definitely true. Yeah, actually, I think I saw bringing this conversation to. I saw two people who I follow talking about this, pissing people off, talking about the Ukrainian war. It's Scott Adams and James Lindsay. And James actually pissed people off like days ago, saying, "I know you guys are gonna hate when I know you guys hate when I do this," and I think it was a Twitter, but you guys have no idea what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And some people jumped on like, oh, so therefore we should not have any opinion. And it's like, no, that's definitely not. Most of us are completely unaware what's going on in Ukraine, and that's something is going on there. We should be trying to figure out, but we should also understand that there is a narrative, there is a propaganda, and mainstream media probably is carrying more of that than what we probably would like to know. And when you think by yourself before you just watch stuff and build your opinion or receive someone's opinion, start parroting that, is, for me, I realized at the beginning, is like, I don't know what's going on there, and what really strikes me is like what the people there, what is the situation of the people there, what they are actually going through for years, because war doesn't start like this from nothing. It's not just gunpowder and then something, someone just lights up something like from nothing. So if there is what now so far with what I have learned from after learning there is a war going on there, is that there was a civil war. People were not happy there already to start. Many Russians being killed inside Ukraine on the borders, and making that move for many people is it's very smart move politically, which might be because we know the entire world is divided by COVID, by freedom convoy, by people standing against mandates all over the place, all across the world. I think the main situation now would be like what I see we are dealing here in Canada is that we don't want more mandates. Many people might not want and don't even want to say, because if you say you don't want, you're a terrorist, you're a freedom convoy supporter, you have so many risks, you would run so many risks, like you have your accounts frozen, be labeled as a terrorist. So of course freedom convoy are not going to have support, okay? But this what they are going right now over there could be our future, could be the future even earlier from United States, because they are more divided politically and in many other subjects more than us Canadians here in Canada. But we are just starting there now with the COVID mandates, mass mandates, vaccine passports. Like you said, the government managed to separate us, split us, and demonize the other side, that people were just wishing the other side to die. The people that follow the rules were like, oh, we just want all these people that do not get vaccinated and do not wear masks to die, and then everything would be solved. That is one of the first things they managed to do when it came with the Nazi Germany, to demonize the other group. And it's like people would not care about their neighbors. They are just enemies. And when I saw that coming months ago, I was crying, saying like, oh my gosh, are the anvax the new Jews, and the government Trudeau, the new Hitler, and everything's going to happen really bad in that way. It was just desperating. Now we see over there, they're already in war. And for us, it's just, how can we help? We didn't want the war to start, but now that already started, are the two sides prepared properly? Is that going to be a fair war? Should support because I don't want anybody to be violent, but imagine if my neighbor is being beaten by his wife. I would feel forced to break the door and like, hey, stop that and do something.
Sure.
And
I notice here that the difference between
Zelensky in Ukraine now is like, should we at least send guns, weapons, send people? So many people, even here in Canada, going there voluntarily to
Yeah.
fight for Ukraine. So what is your position when it comes to war and all these international affairs? In what Canada should do?
Sure. Well, so the general libertarian position on war is if you want to look at kind of the doctrinal libertarian position, just watch or read Ron Paul, and the goal, the role of government is to protect the individual. It's to protect the individuals in that nation, not to protect individuals in other nations, not to be world policemen, not to shoot bad guys overseas that are being bad to people over there. It's to protect Canadians. Our government's role is to protect Canadians, protect us from invasion, protect our individual freedom. That's what our role is. Okay, so that's what we say now. What's happening, and we say this not just that this is based on principle of, look, we extend basically the idea of self-defense to the state, which is, look, I don't have a right to invade my neighbor's home, but I do have the right to defend my home from invasion and use overwhelming force, as much force as necessary to protect my home from invasion. So we extend that same principle essentially to the state. And we also say that, look, not only is that a principle, but there's as Ayn Rand said, what's ethical is also pragmatic, right? Or something like that. And so it turns out that having a non-interventionist policy, something like Switzerland, right, where they stay out of international conflict for the most part. Every home has an assault rifle. Everyone's trained to use their assault rifle. No one messes with Switzerland. They're, free trade, all these things. Everyone's friends with Switzerland because they're open for business and they don't get involved in other people's conflicts. That works fairly well. What doesn't work very well is, let's say, U.S. foreign policy and NATO foreign policy over the last few decades, where the U.S. and other NATO members have been involved in some might call it imperialist activity in the Middle East. We went into Iraq, we went into Afghanistan. Canada was involved in the Libya conflict and bombing Libya and getting rid of Gaddafi. We now have open slave markets and Muslim extremists. The U.S. armed the most extreme Islamists in the Middle East to help overthrow and create regime change there, and created all sorts of chaos and a bubble for more even radical extremists to come in there. It's a giant quagmire. And the stated reason for doing this was, there were various ones. One was to spread democracy and get rid of bad guys like Saddam. And they were bad guys. There's no doubt about it. These people were freaking evil. And but the other object was to deal with terrorism. And of course, terrorism got worse. The more we got involved in these wars, it turns out people don't like having their homelands invaded, and the more violent they get and more hateful they get towards you. And of course, this ramps terrorism up, doesn't quell it. So those are some bad, those are pragmatic reasons on top of the principled reason I talked about of just let's engage in self-defense, not aggressive actions. Even if the person is bad, if they're leaving you alone, leave them alone. So now, what are the consequences also of these wars and interventions in the Middle East? Well, we have, the U.S. has dumped trillions of dollars into there. They're demonstrably poorer and worse off. I mean, Osama bin Laden might have very well accomplished his goal of bankrupting the U.S. by his act of terrorism, and he led the U.S. right by the nose to doing it, right? The other thing I want to point out here before I forget is in 2002, I believe it was, when they really started beating the drums of war to go invade Iraq. And you remember the terrorists didn't come out of Iraq. They came out of Saudi Arabia and some other places. Iraq wasn't involved in this attack on the U.S., but Americans were so bloodthirsty and so out for revenge, and rightfully so. Everyone was hugely pissed. And it was the great Harry Browne who wrote on September 12th, 2001, why the U.S. shouldn't engage in interventionist war, and how 2001 was, of course, caused by these Islamic terrorists. But you can also trace a line back to, U.S. foreign interventionism in the 80s and everything else, right? Where we were funding the Mujahideen, who became ISIS, who became the Taliban, they created the U.S. foreign policy, created the environment that fostered the hatred towards the U.S. and armed these people and gave them the training to attack the U.S.
Yeah, we
And
cannot say that was intentional, but definitely was the result.
well, we could say it was a negative unintended consequence, which is what my point is here. You have negative unintended consequences when you engage in these interventionist activities. You don't know exactly how they're going to blow back on you.
Would it be
Inevitably
that,
do.
sorry,
Yeah.
would it be that a good libertarian position to say, to not intervene unless, let's say, you say, like, you put unless, it becomes pragmatic already, but should we not even help people to liberate themselves when they want to be free? Because what I see, for example, is like, we keep talking about separatist movements as they are evil until they actually successful, and then they are heroes that manage to become independent. So when is the time to support the people that maybe might need and want to liberate? For example, if the Freedom Convoy, even if it's a fringe minority, should they just be crushed, or there is some type of Republican feeling that we need to protect minorities at this point, politically speaking, because minorities are protected everywhere, but not politically, apparently here we can just crush them, call them enemies of the state, terrorists, and use and even, like, just to parallel that, the only thing that might have any resemblance of January 6th and the Freedom Convoy is that Trudeau used the political power to demonize and persecute their political enemies, just like Trudeau is doing here. Huh?
Yeah. So your question is, should we support decentralization? And I say yes. Of course, it depends what you mean by support. Should I pick up arms to support Ukraine separating from Russia, for example? Well, that's a choice for me to make, not anyone else to make. I don't know what you should do, Fanny, in the case of Ukrainian separatism, how you should support them. Maybe I think you should go over there, pick up an AK-47 and help them out. But ultimately, I leave it up to you how you support them. Maybe you invite a Ukrainian family into your home.
Nation-wise, no.
Right,
As the
right.
leader
And
of
that's
the
it.
nation?
Yeah, I think that, again, because the state is demonstrably different than the individual in that it has a geographic monopoly on the use of force. It has this ability to use force, and it has one role, and that is to defend Canadians and homeland. It's not to defend people in other countries fighting for freedom. But I absolutely think it's commendable and have no problem with people going over and on their own dime or charitable dime, whatever, fighting, helping people out, helping neighbors out, and being that. In fact, one of my candidates in the 2015 election went over. He was an ex special forces guy from Canadian Forces, retired, and he went over to Iraq and helped the Kurds fight ISIS and killed ISIS. Perfect. Wonderful. Glad you did it. That's having skin in the game. And one of the policies I put in as leader of the Libertarian Party was, one of the things you notice is that the people making decisions about whether young men should go and die are people that have absolutely no skin in the game. They're people that are never going to be on the front lines and are never going to be at risk. They can throw these young bodies on these causes that generally support the military-industrial complex with no personal. In fact, their power grows, right? So one of the platform pieces I put in was, in order for a member of parliament to vote for or support a motion to engage in military action, that member of parliament automatically gets drafted into a frontline unit in that conflict. Or if they're physically incapable of fighting, they submit 50% of their equity, of their wealth, to support the effort. Because look, if I'm prime minister and it's wartime, I'm not sitting behind a desk. I'm going to be in the trenches, fighting for my family, fighting for my community, fighting for my country. And unless I'm willing to do that, I don't think we need to be going to war, right? So that's what I want to see in a leader. So I want to see people with skin in the game making those decisions, and individuals have their own skin in the game. And so I might not even be opposed to certain military actions that some libertarians might describe as interventionist if my leader thought it was serious enough threat to Canadians. He could draw the lines, even though I couldn't see them. If he was willing to step in and say, I might follow him into battle in that case, and be willing to support that intervention. But what we're seeing right now is a far cry from that. So
yeah, I'm not sure about the time, but I think Alex is about to join us.
okay,
Because
he's got a bunch of questions on there we got to get to.
yeah,
You want me to
he's
start hitting some
asking
of these,
here,
or what?
did you have to take the jab to keep your job?
Yes. I fought for our guys. I got the jab before it was a requirement. I was I saw the Pfizer studies. I saw the, clinical data, and I was one of the first adopters to get it, because I looked at it and I said, okay, it's, I looked at both sides of the issue, and I wasn't blind to the criticisms of the vaccine, right? The spike proteins, the inflammation, the blood clots, all these things are true. They're true risks of the vaccine. But I looked at it and I said, well, are those all, I'm going to get COVID eventually because of the nature of my job. Are those also risks with COVID? And it turns out that most of the risks that people list as risks for the vaccine are also risks for COVID, but they're like 10 to 100 times greater risks for COVID. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get COVID eventually. I know this vaccine isn't going to stop me from getting COVID, but will it lessen the symptoms and make it easier? I didn't want to even lose my taste and my smell, right?
Then you had the COVID after that?
Then I eventually got COVID like 9 or 10 months later, and I got a pretty bad case of it.
How was your COVID?
Yeah, it wasn't great. I was off work for 2 or 3 weeks. Most of the month of December, I was off. I was just weak. I lost my sense of taste and smell. So the vaccine didn't even work.
Actually,
like I was hoping it would.
This hypothesis, which is very just a hypothesis because there is no study apparently about this. But I've heard some people talking about it could be possible too. After I was thinking, my entire family, everybody's doctor. My brother, my brother took the vaccine because he's a doctor. He didn't want to get in the beginning. We all believed that the vaccines were protective. So it's we avoid the
in the beginning, I was pissed at how long they were taking to get to market. Like they had the mRNA.
They didn't want to be infected by a COVID patient.
Fanny, let me jump in here for a second. Tim, good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you too, man.
You guys are more libertarian than me, but I was very skeptical from the very beginning. I thought this was some kind of ploy to make this last forever and transfer wealth up to the corporations, and you're in an excuse for a centralized digital ID that's going to control our bank accounts. So weren't you guys even just a little bit skeptical from the very beginning?
Oh yeah, I was absolutely skeptical. Well, I knew all that stuff was going to happen whether we had a vaccine or not, right? So what I wanted to do was I wanted to see, okay, is there going to be credible evidence that these vaccines work? I talked to an ER doc who's actually a research. He's a double doctor. He's a physician plus a real doctor, okay, because he does research. And I asked him to look at the same studies I was. This guy's a libertarian as well, and skeptical. He has the same views I do. And I said, what does this look solid to you? He said, yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty effective from what I'm seeing, and pretty low risk. So I took that as evidence enough. And I'm of the opinion that, like, there are some people, if the government tells you to jump off a cliff, they jump off a cliff, right? There are other people that if the government tells you not to jump off a cliff, they jump off a cliff, right? And I believe in just doing the right thing regardless of what the government says. Even if the government says take the vaccine, if it's the right thing to do because evidence says it, it's good to take the vaccine, even if the government endorses it. So I'm not like dogmatically. Sometimes the government is accidentally right. Sometimes they're you know, but
So
I think you have to be a free thinker here and view the evidence independent of the cultural war that's going on behind you, kind
how
of thing.
many vaccines did you take? Just one vaccine, and then you had the
I
infection and you
took the
didn't take any
two.
booster,
I took
or
the
you
two
took
initial doses, and then what I was going to do was get an antibody titer, to see if I had any provable immunity. If that was high, I wasn't going to take the booster. If it was low, I was going to take the booster. But then I got COVID, and I always said, once I get COVID and
not
recover
taking
from
any
it,
booster
that I'm
anymore?
done with shots. I don't need any more, because now I've got good immunity. So you know, that's it
How
for
long
me.
was that ago?
It was in December.
Your COVID?
Yeah, I had COVID in December. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Did you test antibodies after that?
I never did. No, I didn't get a
Because
chance to test.
it's an interesting point. I follow a doctor. He is I think he's he's a British doctor. Like, he's not British, but he's in Britain. He is he had the COVID, and what he does as a test his antibodies almost like every month, and after
Right.
years he still has the antibodies, which it would be like the natural immunity is better than the vaccines, because the
Yeah.
vaccines have been proved to be fading, and just to
Yeah,
not
they
be
fade really fast.
100%
Yeah.
effective to start.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. But I have a hypothesis which have not been taken as a study, because I think it would be anti-vax according to their position. Is like, I've seen way many people, like I mentioned, my brother, my sister-in-law, and other young people that are health workers taking the vaccines just to protect their patients. And when they actually got the infection, they had much worse infection than what we believe would be the natural one.
Yeah.
At
Yeah, I
least for
just
the
want to
people
point
who
out, I
took
didn't take
the
any vaccine.
Pfizer, that already fills up your body with the spike proteins that give you such a bad. So imagine you feel like you're just giving a lot of ammunition with the vaccine, producing a lot of spike protein before you get the virus. Then when the virus comes, it has all this protein already, and then you guys end up having a much worse infection than that you would have if it was a natural infection.
Yeah,
That's my hypothesis. But then, of course, people need to study.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, look, these I've got a very high risk tolerance, let's say. I bought a hang glider once out of a classified ads, and taught myself to fly it, and crashed it a bunch of times, tied it behind a pickup truck in a field and crashed it a bunch of times. I taught myself eventually how to fly after. So, and I'm a firefighter. I take risks for a living. And so, to me, I have a high risk tolerance. I knew this vaccine didn't go through the steps that a normal vaccine went through that would have proved, with a pretty substantial body of evidence that it was safe. So, I was willing to take the risk. I certainly don't think it was reasonable to say, I'm not going to take this. But given my job and the fact that I was seeing COVID patients face to face, I was like, okay, well, therapeutics are basically banned
And I probably
in Canada.
would do the same. If I was practicing, I would probably take the vaccine, and not for myself, because I believe I would go just fine through the natural infection, normal infection. But I would probably be feeling responsible to maybe see one patient with COVID and then pass over to vulnerable patients after that. Considering the incubation time, and even if there is an asymptomatic infectious period, not covering all that controversies. But yes, I probably would take the shot. I end up taking the shots because in December all I wanted for Christmas was my freedom back. I was going crazy. I needed to go out everywhere. You need vaccine passports. And
well, let me ask you a question while we got you here, because we were talking about war for a second, and all my friends have been joking for the last 6 months that eventually there's going to be a draft, and we always take it like a joke, and now it seems like there's war on the front door maybe. So from a libertarian perspective, do you think because I'll tell you right now, I'm part of this demoralized generation of guys. I'm not getting drafted to go anywhere. So do you think it's immoral, say, to draft a Dodge to dodge a draft if they implement a a draft for, say 6 months from now when China and Russia are kicking our asses.
Right.
Because I'm not willing to fight for the state at this point. So
yeah.
Dodge it.
It's like asking, is it moral to dodge a slave catcher or something like that? Yeah, of course it's moral.
Yeah,
this is the worst kind of slavery. I mean, they're literally using you as cannon fodder. Like, shit, put me in a field or something picking
I
cotton.
will answer you with
draft me for that before you draft me to go on the. And you're right. Like,
ever. So they'd have
right.
to so hard for them to enforce that on everybody.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, it scares the hell out of me because my boys are 25 and 22. I mean, they're right in that age.
They're right there.
Right. And so do I want them fighting wars for our government, which has crushed us the past 2 years, who is, the government has proven itself to be an enemy of the people.
Basically hates
now you want me to go fight for that criminal cartel? Like, what? Fuck, let whatever country's going to invade us take us over at this point. It can't get much worse than what we're under right now,
Well, that's a follow-up question though, because isn't this sort of an argument for why, like, I'm very libertarian oriented too, but like a strong border with an army to defend, because like
yes.
Russia could come right through Alaska and then they'd be right in BC, right? So
yeah,
I don't think Fanny really agrees that we need like a strong military and a border, but I definitely.
Oh no, I do.
Yeah, I think that
my point is always like nations should be allowed to protect their borders for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, part of my platform was to strengthen our Arctic defenses. And, I think on top of that, what you can make incentives to get people involved in taking personal responsibility for national defense as well, right? Like, I had a very controversial policy. It never got past our board and our members. They weren't a huge fan of it. It was very controversial. It was the idea of using something called a head tax rather than, I think even a flat tax is bad. I think any tax is bad, but maybe a head tax would be all right, where you pay, say, $5,000 or $10,000, and that earns you your right to vote. If you want to vote, you got to pay the head tax. If you don't want to pay taxes,
annually,
fine.
One time or annually?
Annually, something like that. Like I did the math and figured out what it would cost to run the military and run all that kind of stuff. Right now, the other way you could earn a right to vote is military service, similar to what Switzerland does. Sign up for a couple of years and learn how to, and then we'll even give you a free assault rifle. And we have assault rifles with people who know how to use them in every home. And at that point, do we need as strong a military? Maybe not. Maybe, that would be a strong deterrent. I mean, you remember, I think the Japanese emperor or whatever said that there'd be a rifle behind every blade of grass. That's why he didn't favor invading the U.S. mainland. Yeah. So, when you have a heavily armed nation with assault rifles, and, it would be a nightmare to invade Canada. First of all, coming over through the Arctic, I've talked to some military guys and they say that's nearly impossible to mount an invasion through that tundra. It'd be very difficult. And then you've got such a rural and sparsely populated areas in Canada that insurgencies would be a nightmare for any invading force. So I think we could deter people quite handily. And look, if we get our hands on one nuke, all we need is one nuke, and say, look, you invade us, we'll point it directly at your capital city. And I mean, that's a pretty big deterrent too.
I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I like the Starship Troopers model. I think I'd probably be down for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, answering your question about if it's okay to not go to war, if you don't want to go, I would say that I would say you have to read the Anarchist Handbook from Michael Malice, because for me is put in the paper the natural thinking of any human being. If you think about how the politics work today and how you are assigned because you were born in whatever place.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I didn't agree with those things. Why do I have to do this? Oh, because other people chose before. And I was like, okay, can I quit? So point of politics and borders, or even this control, which I mean, which I keep struggling with, the freedom, which we keep claiming, calling, and even saying we're defending freedom, when we have not reached that level yet.
Yeah.
Because you have all government.
Are you talking like pure freedom? Like, for example, child, like there's you. I think you want too much freedom. Most people would agree.
I envision that. I understand that we're perhaps not going to reach that. We might be the ones making the baby steps.
I'm saying there's some common sense. The baby your definition is a little out there. Like, let me ask Tim this, like, for some perspective.
For anarchism. But I understand we can't transition from what we have to that.
Fanny, hold on for a second. Tim, this is what I'm talking about. For example, Fanny doesn't believe in child labor laws at all. So in her view, like a 6-year-old could be out in the field, like, and where I'm from, there are families that basically birth like large amounts of offspring just to work in the fields, and so there are like, so I would say, like, I don't know, you got to be 10 minimum to be like getting a paycheck from a corporation or something.
So
sure. No, right? Like there's got to be an abortion. I'm down for like first term, but like third term abortion when someone's like 8 months pregnant, it's kind of calling it close to the edge. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah. No, I look, I agree. I haven't really thought about child labor laws, to be honest with you. There's this kind of common, I guess, socialist or union trope that, the Industrial Revolution created child labor, and it was only through organized labor movements and unions that ended, right? But I'm of a different camp of, look, capitalism and the Industrial Revolution, as terrible as child labor was, it was better than what they were going through. The alternative wasn't like playing with hula hoops all day and frolicking in meadows. It was before dawn till after dusk, hard labor and probably death in fields and different things like that. And so the reason children and families chose to send their children to factories was because it was a preferable alternative to what they faced, which is horrible. So the alternatives were horrible. I grew up on a farm. I was picking rocks and roots at the age of 6 in the field. I didn't like it. I wish there was child labor laws to stop my mean old man from making me work. But right. But at the end of the day, look, it wasn't like they were working me from before dawn till after dusk. They gave me work that was appropriate for a 6-year-old, I feel. And I believe it made me better because, look, I did the work. So the question then is, okay, when I think about this, and again, I haven't thought about, so I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm thinking in terms of the principle. Okay, when is it justified for an individual to use force to stop something from happening? And there are certainly things, I think there are, that happen to children. Like a child can't consent to sex, right? They lack capacity to consent to certain things, sex being one of them. They're under custodial duty of an adult. I can stop. Even if the child says they're willing to do it, no, we can stop that from happening. That is not a consensual.
That's a good example of where we need laws to stop that.
Right. Well, yeah.
But there is a principle that would justify.
And so we can use force, and therefore I don't have a problem with laws around that. Right now, what about working? Okay, well, I don't have a problem with the family using their, having their child contribute to the family business, whether it's a farm or a mom and pop shop. Like, I would have a hard time justifying going in there and saying, thou shalt not work thy child so hard. That's terrible. Even if I might think they're being hard on their kid and being a little too thing, again, I've engaged in these debates with other libertarians about, okay, when is the line, for example, of child abuse? When am I justified in using force to take custody of a child away from a family? There is a point. Okay, it's hard to narrow down when that point is, and I'm not sure you can make a blanket law like you can write out in legislation where exactly that point is, because certainly if they have like a hard single assault on that child where they break bones or something like that, that obviously would be enough. But that is, what about prolonged mental and malnutrition and stuff? At what point do you do? So there has to be some due process for this to happen to prove abuse. Now, so I would then apply this to like looking at labor laws and when can a child work a job and earn some money? When can they deliver newspapers? And how is that different than going into Ford Motor Factory and turning wrenches or something like that? Well, I think obviously, you know, I'm skeptical that children would be hired for much. You know, they're just pretty useless economically, except for very menial tasks. And again, when a family gets a child working, it's not because their family necessarily becomes more productive. It's because they're learning a work ethic that's going to carry over, and skills that are going to carry over into making them economically productive. But certainly, you know, I'm sure there are instances where maybe a corporation can benefit from a child that they don't have to pay very much. That I'm lost as to what that circumstance would be, but I would certainly, you know, maybe support a law that did that. I mean, if you have child abuse, which is, I think, essentially what you're talking about here, then we want to protect the normal laws.
We don't need the special laws for that.
Well, well, I guess, I was thinking specifically in an agricultural context. I guess there are families that'll have, say, like 10 kids in 12-year period, and like Mennonite communities and things like that, and just like them like to the bone from the age of, say, 6 to like 15, and they're like,
well, I'll tell you, I grew up in an agriculture community, and you know, farm kids, we all had to work, and I don't think any of us resent that or regret that. I mean, certainly in the moment, we didn't like the work.
I think Alex is talking about people that really abuse the kids for like financial purposes, which I think that is very little, you know, because what I think, it would be redundant to talk about this because we kind of talked about this yesterday, but I mentioned to him that I think libertarians have a lot of more trust, hope in humanity, because my views are that I've seen families, I've met people that came from farms that they told me, like, in university, they were in university, and thanks for their parents to have let them work in the potato farms, because that was all what the entire family had to eat and sell to survive. So it wasn't an option.
Well, there's a lot. I think
the government go there and say, like, you cannot put your kid to work. Say, but I cannot put my kid to study. I cannot put my kid in school, and I cannot take care of this kid. We all need to work in this field. So for me, as a libertarian, I don't think the government has any role to tell parents to what to do, because the parents would only put the kids to do that when they actually need. And as soon as they get in that better situation, the kids are going to go to school. This is what we see. That is the normal path we see most of the times. Okay, there are some evil people that abuse children. Yeah, but the laws are already there to stop people from beating kids, from over abusing their employees. It's not special. Like, oh, we need to make new laws. Making new laws only justifies bigger government. And I don't think that is...
Fanny, give me 10 years for 1 second. 8 month, it's 8 months into a pregnancy, abortion, yay or nay? You say yay, right?
I say, you challenge me, and I love that, because 2 days I was thinking that's like, okay, we're going to turn the system to try to persuade these ladies.
Hold on, just yay or nay.
To abortion, not to abortion, to adoption. No, we can talk about this for 2 days. I don't, no, sorry. What, sorry?
Just give me a yay or a nay for just say yes.
Sorry, I will give you. It will be, like I said, not, the lady can have it, will not be paid by the government. So comes to yay, go ahead and find a doctor that will do that at 1 day before.
Okay, understood. So Tim, what do you think? Like, even if you pay for yourself 8th month in, what do you like? Still legal to do it? If you
well, I say nay. You shouldn't do that. I'm not a fan. You know, I'm fairly. No, I'm not
saying to do it. I'm saying that she should be allowed to.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
That will do it.
Yeah,
and that is what I think is going to be very hard.
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, I look. I'm pro-life. I hate the idea of abortion, but I'm also skeptical that government force is the best way to solve the problem. Like, for example, you know, it's a hostage taking situation, right? And so when I think about a law, the way I think about it is that you can escalate force. Whenever you bring in a law, it's mandatory, because force can escalate up to the point where you kill the person that is obstinately disobeying it. Now, at what point? And the problem is you can't kill pregnant women and expect to save the baby that they're trying to kill in their womb, right? It's a technical problem that occurs. And so the question then is, okay, well, what do you do with them after they've committed the act? Do you lock them up in prison for life? Do you give them a hysterectomy so that they can no longer have kids? I don't know what the answer is to that question, and so I'm hesitant to impose laws that I think might create more problems than they solve. And I think there are a lot of ways to solve the problem of abortion that don't use force use. For example, legalize private adoption, allow charities and couples to pay a mother who has an unwanted pregnancy to bring that baby to term, pay them large sums of money if need be.
That sounds like some might call it risks associated with it, though. You can imagine predators would be instantly attracted to that.
Yeah, sure. And so you need some sort of vetting process for that, right? Because that would be a concern. And there would be a lot of agencies that would share that concern that would I would expect fill the market void, the market demand for that, of wanting to make sure these children went to loving homes and not pedophile rings or something like that. That would be a huge concern. And certainly there would be people that would want to solve that problem. So, but I think there are ways of solving this. I guess my point is without going to violence. But yeah, I'm generally, I'm not opposed to. I'm kind of on the fence on this. I can't give you a strong answer, but at the end of the day, I can't find a lot of fault with Walter Block's position of evictionism. Have you heard this, Fanny? Walter Block's evictionism. And he says this. He says, at the point that you are, like, I can't, if someone's trespassing in my home, I can't kill them to evict them, right? I have to make every reasonable effort to evict them safely. Now, what if I can't evict them safely? Do I have the right to evict them, or do I have to stay with them in my home for 9 months? What if they start messing around with my internal organs? What do I have to tolerate it then? What if the only way to get rid of that trespasser was to kill him and cut him up and shove him through the mail slot? And I mean, I don't know how you argue that.
I don't think so. My principles would say I'm gonna definitely shoot anybody that trespass my property, my limits,
but
my
Fanny,
private.
what if you invited them?
If I invite them?
Yeah, what if you invited them and then it turns out you don't want them anymore? Let's say you invite them into your home and now you don't want them anymore.
Oh, I invite them to my house.
Yeah.
Oh, that is very different, Like,
and then they become unwelcome guests, though.
I should just invite them out.
What's that?
If I invite them in, I should just invite them out.
Okay, let's say the only way to get them out of your home now that they're uninvited is to kill them and cut them up and shove them out through the mail slot.
I don't understand
Would you do that?
the part of the desecrating the body. I would just kill them and call the police. Look, I had to kill this person, would not leave my house.
Okay, well, the analogy, I'm making an analogy to abortion.
I'll pay for my acts.
Here's the point I'm making.
Sorry.
Here's the point I'm making, and this is where I'm kind of pro-life. It's like, okay, you invited a person into your body, into your home, all right, and now you're saying you want to have the right to kill that person that you invited into your home.
No, but sometimes it's not invited. It could be a rape. It could be an accident. Okay. I didn't really want to have, so now it's an invasion. And it comes to, for me, my argument to close the two things of the abortion and whatever other thing would be like the vax mandate would be, if you have to, I have this conversation on Reddit. People were talking about how those things, or government imposing us stuff, is us agreeing to live in society. And I was like, no, I understand that you can give your freedom away, but it should not be, like you said, imposed that I have to give my freedoms away. And when it comes to abortion or guns and government banning things, my argument is, we see the government trying to do what Alex said, like, let's ban the labor, like child labor, let's ban abortion. And guess what happens? What is the point of, like, one of the arguments of libertarians? It doesn't work because people will
Yeah,
do what they want to do. So in the end, you force, you trying to, I understand it's an attempt, but it's a waste of energy, of resource, of money, of people, to try
sure.
to force people
So
to do things they
here's
don't
where
want,
we're
or
at
to
then,
try to
Alex.
impede them to do things they want.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like,
Continue, Tim. Sorry.
Well, it's that's how I kind of think about abortion. I'll take the assumption that at some point that's an actual person. Maybe it's even at the point of conception. Maybe it's even before conception. Like maybe it's at spermatogenesis, right? Because each sperm has their
but
own
they are
individual
speaking
thing,
people
and
that they
maybe
are
it's
like half of people.
masturbation is genocide. We can argue about where, but at some point I do agree that that is a person that maybe deserves legal protection. But then it's like, okay, even if we assume that that person, even if you invited them, is in your place and they're messing around with your internal organs, and now suddenly you don't want them anymore, right? And what can you do? So that's the thought bubble I go to. But I want to like, this is what we're arguing about, is when can you shoot a person trying to do this? But I think that
cutoff line.
What's that?
Yeah, we're basically trying to figure out where's the arbitrary cutoff line.
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting argument. But I think that another point I want to make is, I'd encourage everyone to go to the libertarian.ca and take a look at the platform I put out there on marriage and family, for example, because I think that unwanted pregnancies and promiscuity and this kind of social degradation, let's say, and the destruction of the family unit has a lot to do with the state. In fact, almost all to do with the state. The state has replaced the husband in marriage. Like, men are looked at as resource objects by the state, and they've been reduced to that, right, by a lot of legislation and different things. So the welfare state, promotes it takes away personal responsibility for pregnancies and different things like that. Getting rid of a husband in the home, making the act of bringing a child into the world something that occurs outside of a marriage where you have a stable environment. That all these things contribute. And our point also around marriage is that, look, this is a contract between two people. And the way family law is set up right now, one of these people can unilaterally break the contract and suffer no consequences. That there is no, in fact, you impose the cost on the other person, right? And so there are all these forces that break up the family. Even public school, I would argue, plays a role in this. And this is why I would argue we see so much social degradation, so many unwanted pregnancies, so much promiscuity and different things like that. And so, I truly believe that a libertarian society where vice is technically legal would actually be much more culturally, socially conservative, because when you have to take responsibility for the mistakes you make and the vice you engage in, and that cost is now borne by you rather than the rest of society, you tend to start making better choices. And those better choices tend to be socially conservative choices. They support family and the long-term vision rather than immediate gratification.
That is a super, super interesting point. And
what is your position about the abortion in the government? The government would ban abortion, or the government would allow abortion, pay, and if allowing, pay for it? How would be that?
Well, I kind of weaseled out of it. I obviously I don't think the government
You
should
don't
pay
want to have
for anything. But I think at the end of the day, I kind of subscribe to Walter Block's evictionism. And Walter Block's evictionism is this: if you are able to get an unwanted guest out of your property safely.
Are you saying that to your, sorry, but would it be like, because I understand your what you
do you know Walter Block's evictionism
talk about him, would it be that you would put all your efforts as government to try to persuade the woman to have the baby and give it for adoption?
No, I don't think that that's the government's role. I think the government's role is to protect the individual. I don't think it gets involved in social constructivism or something like that. I'm walking you through where I think my point is here. And I think this is, Walter Block talks about this being a technological thing, right? So at the point that baby can be evicted safely, it becomes murder to kill the baby. So in other words, if that baby's, say, 3 months gestation, but there's technology that exists that can put it up, bring it out, put it in an artificial womb, bring it up to gestation, then you can legally protect that baby. It's a technical problem. And he says you have the right to evict, but not kill. But if there's no other way to evict than to kill, then you must be allowed the option to kill. So you can apply that to private property. You can apply that to the womb. You can apply that to, so, I have a hard time. I'm not a big fan of that. I want there to be some magic solution called government that can solve the problem. I see it as a problem. I don't like it. I think it's horrible. I think it's unethical in a lot of ways, but I don't know what the government can do about it. So I think I agree with you, Fanny, at the end of it, even though I think we have different views maybe on abortion itself.
What about the, sorry.
Hold on, let me just say one more comment. I just wanted to respond to what Tim said before. I like your hypothesis, but I'm skeptical of it when you say that without some of this government intervention, there'd be a lot more social conservatism. The reason for that, and this is the observation I actually wanted to make, because the two of you are both very libertarian, but the thing is, Fanny's coming at things from a very atheistic point of view in life. She's very much just a full-on atheist. I believe, you can clarify for me, I think you have more of a spiritual view. Maybe you go to church or believe in God at least. So I think that, like, in the absence of government, what kind of like culture or beliefs you're bringing to the table is sort of how you'll navigate that libertarian space. So you would obviously be extremely like responsible and probably socially conservative anyway. So would I. Fanny just yesterday was advocating like, guys shouldn't feel bad about being a cuck if they want to watch their wives do whatever, like full on abortion to the very end. Basically, as
no, I was saying that maybe they should not be shamed for doing that. It's just another stigma and taboo. I don't know.
I don't see you being socially conservative if you weren't forced to be at all.
Well, I don't think people should not exist this type of socialism, social conservatism it needs to be applied to them. I love that some people like those things and I don't, but I'm fine. I think it's curious how today you can be whatever you want, okay, but I cannot declare myself or how they call identify myself as vaccinated person, and when someone comes out of the closet as whatever, doing some kink stuff, everybody shames them or themselves, like the Jack Murphy situation, that he was ashamed to say that he liked cucking before, and now it's just, no, it's bad, it's wrong. Should be like, he should try to normalize it. Say like, no, there's a bunch of people that likes this. Can be weird to some, other people like, maybe not something to bring to the table, but are we allowed to cuck? And if we're allowed to cuck, are we allowed to tell other people, or we should do the Game of Thrones walk of shame? I don't know.
I think that you are in different spiritual paradigms. I'm pretty sure of that.
Maybe. Although, look, I came to, I was a pretty hardcore anti-theist for a while there. I grew up in an evangelical Christian household.
I'm not anti-theist. I'm a secular atheist.
And at one point, I was going through a divorce, which was very painful, and I believed that it was going to send me to hell, and I was looking for a loophole so that I wouldn't have to go to hell. And I just started reading like counter narratives, right? Like just different ways of interpreting scripture. I was looking for maybe another denomination that supported me not going to hell, and if I was a biblical literalist in that. I believed it was the word of God and that we could find for sure truth in there. And so then I came to an epiphany that had I grown up in another part of the world, I would have a completely different worldview. And that everything I believed in terms of my religion had been put there by my culture, by my church, by my family, by where I grew up. And had I grown up somewhere else. So I'd like to think of myself up to that point as someone who was rational and who came to their beliefs through kind of evidence, reason, first principles. And I realized that none of my beliefs, and it was very unsettling for me. And so I went through kind of a strong kind of atheistic faith. Now I would still say I'm probably an atheist, but I got to tell you that, exposure to guys like Jordan Peterson put a different take on it. And certainly even before Peterson came along, I softened myself towards Christianity quite a bit.
Sorry,
and I looked at it as, when I went to church with my mom, for example, as in looking at it through atheistic lens, and I'm trying to figure out, well, there's something good here going on. Like when the pastor talks about prayer requests and people stand up and the congregation hears what is on their mind and what they're concerned about, and the pastor says his prayer, what's actually happening, if I'm going to describe this from a rational perspective, taking out a supernatural entity up there in the sky, hearing everything and doing stuff about it, is there something good happening? Yeah, there absolutely is something good happening. There's a community coming together. And you're right in that,
I think that
libertarianism is a lot like atheism in that it offers nothing, right? It just says what not to believe or what not to do. But you need to have some.
Sorry, I would like to interject, because this is definitely something that it's a huge point of reconversion of many people that falls in agnostic atheists, realize that epistemologically makes no sense to pick and choose any of so many thousands of gods and religions that exist. But I agree that there is a lack of community, of that local community thing that we all need. We need to have friends and meet once in a week and do things together, but the kids to play that we don't have when we lose the religious community. So there is a lot of the conversation into, you don't need to be a hardcore anti-theist and not go to church. You can be a secular atheist and still go to church. True. Or not go to church, but go to the meetings and have this disconnection is still a gap and a big problem in the atheist community, because it's what we talk about libertarians, how you herd cats. They are just not for the government, but then how you put all them together. Right now, so many people, freedom convoy supporters, that don't know where they would go to meet other freedom fighters. Are they going to go PPC? Are they going to go Libertarian Party here in Canada? Right. We don't know. And we feel
and one of the terms I like to use is statheist, right? In that, you're right, Alex. Quite often, when you lose your religion or you lose your faith in God or something like that, you replace it with something else, and quite often people replace it with worship of the state. They replace one non-corporeal entity with another, and that non-corporeal entity called the state is the worst religion, the most harmful religion there can be. So I certainly wouldn't want to disabuse people of faith, and I recognize there's a huge benefit to it. And I've struggled in my own life to bring myself back to trying to have some spiritual understanding of what does my life need to be centered around. I'm not initiating force against people, I'm not doing these irrational things, but what am I actually doing? What direction am I taking now? I know what not to do. And it's kind of like, you can't drive down the road by steering away from ditches, right? And that's kind of what libertarianism and atheism offer. It's like steer away from the ditches. Well, that's a pretty windy thing. And what you want to do is find a target straight down the road that you can aim at. What is that target?
I would say is objectivism.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing about objectivism that I do like, is that they offer some aspirational quality, right? That libertarianism in general doesn't offer. So objectivism kind of offers that, but and so for me, it's about finding the things that provide meaning in my life, and that's generally family, my community, my brothers at work, and the fight that I'm engaged in, right? So in the last 6 months, it was, I need to get my guys, the guys that I work with, back to work, and I need to fight this fight. That's something I can singularly focus on, and drive forward with. And I hope that one day, and I think objectivism is good, but I think that Ayn Rand isn't as consistent as I'd like her to be with objectivism, because I think if she was truly consistent, she would be an anarcho-capitalist.
Well,
I want there to be a secular version of church. That would be ideal to me. I can go to church now and suspend and listen to the pastor's words through a different lens, not a literal lens, but I can look at it through kind of more of a metaphorical lens and recognize God as not like a person up there, like a sky god, a sky man, or a supernatural entity, but something else more Petersonian, right? So I can go to church and get that, but I would love there to be some sort of religion or practice that I could center myself on, that gets rid of a lot of the mystical and magical language that I have a hard time with, and focuses more. So if there was like a church, a Petersonian church or something like that, I think I could maybe find my way back, Can
I give you a suggestion in case you might be interested? I don't know if you've ever heard of Chris Langan. He's this guy with the highest recorded measured IQ ever. It's like ranges between 195 and 210, but so he is absolutely brilliant. But he has this thing called the CTMU, which I'm a big fan of, which is kind of like meta religion, because I'm not religious at all, but I do believe in God, because and the soul and things. I believe it's about consciousness and
he's definitely smart
and stuff. So I think that the answer to what you were talking about before for me is like meta religion, or a universal spirituality,
new religion,
dogma. Because I think like there've been a lot of brilliant quantum physicists and other Western scientists that have said, like at the highest level, science and spirituality do synthesize, because quantum physics kind of invalidates materialism and so on. So if you look into like Chris Langan or the CTMU,
Langan, Langan.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh yeah, okay. Perfect, thank you.
CTMU, he just did an interview with Keith Woods like a week ago, and that was excellent. And so I think that like you might find that really interesting, based on what you just told me.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, can I give just like a little interjection here about those? Because I love the way that I see is like we are in all different stages of atheism. Like a culturally traditionalist team is still like, as many people of my family here in Canada, they say like, yeah, we're atheists, and many of them still celebrate. What I feel very good about being an atheist is that not being in any specific group makes me very free to celebrate and participate in any religious ceremony, event, or groups. And I feel very detached to like to not be like you said, anti-theist, of not celebrate or even stopping people. I remember when my brother was an atheist, he would open his window during the ceremony of the evangelicals and yell like, you guys don't need to yell this loud for God, so he would be like very offensive sometimes to religious people, which I really don't tend to do. Just my libertarian position is like, you want to pray, you want to wear masks, go ahead, go do your ceremony. But my criticism was always, when I was young already and atheist, but didn't even know the term, was pass in front of a church and see so many people so many times a week, so many hours wasted praising gods, different gods, which whatever, there are thousands of gods, pick and choose whatever you want. I've gone through those exercises too, when I felt very compelled by society to believe something. I tried to find one, and then I found out that I was just doing the same exercise and I didn't want to do. I just had this vision of like to be sitting in the middle of these people, mostly in the end when I was spiritualist and reading many different doctrines of spiritism. I was like, we could be doing so much better, for our community, for our people locally, if we were like doing some voluntary collecting food, collecting clothing, for helping people on the streets, than to sit here, this guy say this nonsensical shit. What, like I just think I'm very humanist. I'm an individualist, objectivist, libertarian. I don't think I follow anybody. I don't think I follow Rothbard or Rand. I know very little about everybody because I don't have time to actually go deep as much as I would like, but also because I like to make my mind as I think we as objectivists having a brain thinking, we can find the same conclusions as we don't want to be ruled by other people in the end. And that is freedom. And the man can only be happy if he is really free, to do those choices.
Well, I look at what's going on there, and
would be the secular atheism would be a place where multiculturalism is possible, which we see in many places, as Canada, Brazil, and many places. And the one core value that we need to hold is that we all have like some values, moral values that are the same. And those moral values, they are not religious. They are secular values. Religious love to claim, just like racist people love to claim that being polite or being successful is white shit. It's not. And religious people love to say, oh, to be nice and to be good and to be nice to other people is religion. No, fuck shit. Be religious is fight your other religious enemies. Is cut their heads, is crusades, is all that. We now play the game of picking and choosing in the Bible and say religion is all love and God is all amazing, but it's not true.
Sure.
So I think we are, like I said, we are rationalists. We can make that choice, and we can be good without gods. And
well, yeah, certainly we can, but
condescending to believe people cannot be good.
We got you. No problem. Sorry, continue, Tim.
Yeah, so we, I have some sympathy with your perspective, Fanny. And I probably thought the same way you did maybe 5 or 10 years ago, when I'd see people worship. But if we're going to be approach this rationally and objectively, we need to look at what's going on in these communities. Is there any benefit to what's going on? And is that benefit being realized in atheist or secular communities? And if we are going to be honest,
is the answer. You know why? Because if we had the smaller government, we would have more money in our hands. I know how much I used to pay in tax. I know how much tax we pay here. And I bet with you that we would give more for charity. And also not even speaking of the charity of open business. Giving people
I don't want him to forget what he was saying. I don't want him to forget his point. Let him finish, Fanny. Hold on.
Well, and so if we're going to be honest, we have to recognize there's something beneficial going on here in these religious communities and in these faith practices.
This is pragmatism.
Right? And there might be, well, it
could be better without. Look, my point is like,
but it's not. It's not better without.
Yeah, would be much better without religion. Maybe we would have worked in stem cells, and we would live more. We would live longer.
But it's not better. But it's not better without these communities. You can look at and see that, right? There's more charitable giving. There's more humanism occurring in Christian churches than there is in humanist organizations.
But it's not blind. But it is something that is biased. It's like religious groups only give charity to their friends and their people and the people that they can evangelize. And I'm talking about no secularism is something that is like when the churches close and we don't.
But Fanny, you're being blind here. It's like you're being willfully blind because these people are more.
He's saying like there is only this way to go, and I'm saying like
no, I'm not saying there's only this way to go. I'm saying you have to be honest and recognize that there's something going on in these churches that isn't going on in the secular community. Now, I agree with you that you don't need to have these views to be charitable, to be moral, to be. In fact, a lot of times they impinge on morality, right? When you go the dogmatic route, but there's something going on here in terms of personal and spiritual development in these communities and charitability and humanism and all these things that we value that isn't going on in our communities as well. So my challenge and my question then is, well, how do I translate that over? What is it that's actually going on here, and how can I adopt that? Now, Alex has recommended the CTMU by this high IQ fella. Maybe that's an answer. Maybe there's something else out there. But I think if we're going to be honest inquisitors, we have to recognize facts and say, okay, something of value is going on here. How can we have all these good things
Take
without the bad
out
things
of
that
it
come with
what
them,
is
right?
value.
And I think generally speaking, religion, when it's focused on the individual and their own spiritual development rather than proselytizing or trying to change the world based on your worldview, when it's about you taking personal responsibility in your life, lifting yourself up, you go to church, maybe what's happening is some form of meditation, focusing your mind on something that's bigger than yourself. And I think that's great for the individual, and then therefore great for the community. It opens you up to want to be better to the people around you. I want to be more caring and giving and all these things. So we need to find a way in if we're going to be atheists and secularists to recognize that there's something positive going on here and try to figure out, well, how can we do that and get rid of the supernatural language?
Take that and try to bring that to our community. That's why I'm saying that's like it has a need. I've been talking to this atheists for like over 2 years. I have a huge list of people that my question is always that, like, how can we bring something that doesn't need to go back to religious, doesn't need to be new apologetic, doesn't need to be new conservative, that can be something, sorry, Alice, that can be something new, secular, that has that community and that works for the good of everybody and not just for my religious group. Because what I see religious from you see the good and I see still bad. I see that there is something better than that, because the religious group for me, they are one of these things that segregate people the first. You don't go to my church, you go to the other church. You don't believe my God, you don't have my values. So for me, it would be amazing, a Sunday assembly, secular assembly, that we can all talk about not even religious shit. No, I don't want to attack any religious group. Let's talk about science, let's talk about politics, let's talk about reality. Let's talk about improvement, our self-improvement.
Fanny, let me jump in for a second.
I'm just saying that this is possible. It's not because it doesn't exist yet.
Fanny, hold on.
We keep
point here. I'm piggybacking on what Tim said, because Tim, I totally agree with you that human beings have a natural impulse to want to need. We all have this intuitive feeling like there's something bigger than us. So wherever our level is cognitively, we kind of interpret that in different phases. And like, I'm not religious because I don't like the dogma around all this stuff or institutions, but spirituality isn't something that most people can do without. So when I see like my mom going to church and stuff, those communities are stronger because they are venerating that sense of community, because they're worshiping something greater than themselves, right? So Fanny, if we to take your view and just try to use just science and reason, that's not enough for most people. You can't use those things to explain love or anything transcendent. So like, but what I'm saying, the answer to this sort of riddle is that like, literally, if you learn more and educate, like science and spirituality will come together, because materialism, like a lot of atheists just treat that as a default position when they get rid of religion, or even what I'm not even saying materialism per se, like fundamentalist materialism, but like you can't operate in a void. And then if you learn more about quantum physics and a lot of other stuff, like about consciousnness and the study of it, it has aspects that, for lack of any other better word, are spiritual. So there is.
Yeah, I know a bunch of apologetics.
There's a spirituality rooted in science that can be universal, and I think like all communities, if they're going to build and be successful, need something spiritual to wrestle with. And if you want to get rid of faith and that aspect of it in the institution, because there's always abuse with hierarchies and all that,
I don't want to. That is the default. That is your.
What I'm saying is, when that all falls away, that doesn't leave you in this void where like anything goes. Because like all of your options on your views on like abortion, like you're coming from this position where there is no God and life is just kind of a random evolutionary byproduct, which I don't think is true at all. And that doesn't have to be like a tenet of atheism.
So let's say like this. So you don't believe evolution at all?
No, I absolutely believe in evolution. The universe.
Okay, so you believe in God?
I believe consciousness.
You believe Jesus existed?
Walks itself through the physical universe. It's a self-aware.
You believe Jesus existed and died on the cross for Adam and Eve?
I think there was a historical person named Jesus that existed, and I am agnostic on whether or not the Christ archetype, like how it expressed itself through him. I don't know.
Have you thought about how Jesus would not be possible to exist if evolution actually existed?
That's not true, and you have to clarify a historical.
No, it's totally true. No, just do the exercise with me, though.
You have to define these terms more precisely to even make that point. Like, because there was a
Jesus was a person. You said that was historical person. So it's like, did he die on the cross, crucified because of people's sins? And the people's sins was the original sin, which was Adam and Eve to commit the original sin, which would give humans their form and justify how God made humans in their form, and that cannot be compatible with evolution. Just saying.
I would say this.
I love to make those philosophical
Historically,
exercises. And this is something we should do in the church too.
I'm agnostic on what his motives were because I wasn't there, but I'm saying there's a historical record of a person named Jesus who was crucified. So there's that. And then there's an archetype, a story that's been laid over top of him and disseminated through religion. I think there's a lot of spiritual wisdom in it. To what degree it's literally true, I don't know. I'm not a biblical literalist, but I think the symbology and the archetypes of it are valuable to people. So like you have a massively oversimplified version of religion and evolution even, and you're throwing all the baby out.
No, so sorry to have passed to you this type of view of me. No, much the opposite. I've read the Bible and I know quite a lot about those things, and I would love to exercise those, epistemologically with you. So you maybe would even stop saying that. No.
But what do you think of Fanny? What do you think of Jordan Peterson's view on religion? Are you familiar with it at all, or Young's
I don't
view?
know much about Jordan Peterson. I didn't like when he come out against the gender pronouns, or to forcing people to tell, the entitlement of forcing people to use whatever pronoun you want. And I think that was a very good cause. I might not agree with his new apologetic movement. He is turning back to religious just because it's easy to measure. It's easy to see the waters. If you're smart, you can tell people still need to follow religions. So it's easier to throw a new religion than to try to lead people to think rationally. And I think he is smart enough to be able to tell that maybe we're not in that time yet. I am more of I'm just myself. I'm not gonna trying to become anybody famous, or Ayn Rand. Would be amazing to become some Michael Malice, but I don't know. But
you're a firefighter, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever talk to anyone that's had a near-death experience? Do you ever revive anybody that talked about like seeing the light or anything like that?
Yes, my father has been in a coma, came back. I've had Alex. Look, you don't know me. People know. People who don't know.
My dad was a firefighter and a paramedic too, and he had a few experiences like talking about people. So I used to study the phenomenon.
Alex, let me tell you, our brain is set with a lot of things. So you can see ghosts, you can have near-death experience, you can feel presence of whatever other spirits. You can even have extraterrestrials experience that might be very easy for us to even kind of tell what happened to you, because this is imprinted.
There's a lot of theories that
not collective memory as we have a collective memory, but we all have been suggested, primed by what this is supposed to be. So if you want to believe pretty much anything on the internet, you're going to find evidence, for it. That's my point. I don't want to change anybody's beliefs. I understand people believe crazy shit all the time.
Fanny,
it should be allowed. But I told you, I don't want socialism.
Okay. Okay.
Socialism, Alex.
Yeah. Okay. I think that there's a lot of Fanny is a perfect illustration of the skeptics saying, this is a hallucination of the brain and so on. But I think that explanation just doesn't work when the brain is just completely clinically brain dead. There's no electrical activity. There's all kinds of things. There's also cross-cultural studies that can compare certain percentages.
Yeah, and that is not the situation of someone in coma, okay? Let's say like this. Look, I don't want to be playing the medical card. Like, I'm a doctor. I know the conditions. I don't think there is anything supernatural in our body. When you talk about soul, I could understand that we're going to be talking about what I understand is we have consciousness. You think it comes from something that comes from outside your body, from a supernatural being that gives you this power of life and embodies you, enters your body. I think There is nothing of that, because I have believed what you believe now. Very many years in the past, I used to go to spiritists. I used to read Allan Kardec. I read many doctrines that even explain if rocks have souls, if plants have souls, if animals have souls, where they go, where they come from, if they can interchange. Look, there is a lot of things if you want to believe this. That my point. You think I'm empty atheist that don't know anything. I've believed in Christ. I've gone to church. I've wanted, or I look, for me was like this. Someone came to me and said, Fanny, there is a guy, super powerful, supernatural, sitting outside of space-time everywhere forever. And one day, when nothing existed, he clicked his fingers and then, bam, we all came to life. Something like that. Everything that exists came from him. And I was like, okay, it makes no sense, because if everything is so complex that needs some super complex being, where did he come from? How could he be just like sitting in the nowhere and then one day bored, boom, do this? For me, fucking 6 years old, I think it didn't make sense. I don't care if people still believe that. I think people should be allowed to believe that, okay? And they should go to their church and do their community shit. I think it would be better if you don't believe that. If we can talk about all those beliefs, not just the Christian belief, God, talk about Muhammad.
I need you to clarify. I need you to
talk about the other religions. My point, I just wanted to tell you.
You're rambling a little bit, but clarify this for me. What do you think consciousness is? Do you think it's a byproduct of a physical
particle? I think it is a process that happens in the one thing physical that we can actually open, and actually we know parts, how it works. To not know how it works completely doesn't. Look, Hitchens, which I'm not, I love Hitchens. I'm not an anti-theist like Hitchens was, but I appreciate a lot of Hitchens' work. Of course, I criticize a lot of his work as reparations. But the point is, there is I know for sure that our consciousness is connected to the brain, okay? You tell me there is something else around the soul that affects you. And I was like, sure, if we don't find it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because it's very impossible to prove negatives, okay? And we understand that in scientific method. But the point was that to not know completely something, which Hitchens would love to say about reality, when people claim the unknown is the supernatural, is God, fairies, gnomes, whatever you want to believe, that the pocket of ignorance gets smaller every day. We know more, and we have once believed that God was actually, the sun was God, because we didn't know it was a star. Now you want to still believe, oh, there is something that we don't know about the brain or the body, and we just didn't made yet a machine that can detect this energy that is the soul. Even if we can detect all of the fucking shit around, go out space and see the Higgs boson stuff. No, let's play quantum physics, Deepak Chopra bullshit or whatever, and believe something. I'm fine with that. But we do know, like, there are a lot more that we know you could go, and it's fascinating, much more fascinating than all the obscure woo-woo, whatever, coexist, the new religion. You can believe whatever you want, just come in and give me your money. And we give a community. Yeah. Great. I want to, look, I think when I was fucking 12, I was like walking around like, there's no religion I like, and apparently I have to assign to one, or I'm going to be hated by everybody. I guess I'm going to have to make my own religion. And I was 12, I was saying, like, I don't like those gods that love people, but they're going to send them to hell forever if they don't believe, like, I would like to be more like a good God that goes there and like, okay, so I see you didn't believe, but you were doing good. So, okay, come into my heavens. I guess I'm going to still have to open my religion one day.
Well, Sorry.
Let's do that, guys.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think, Fanny, you've done a great job of destroying that straw man. Just from an objective point of view, I don't think any of what you argued against is what maybe Alex was asking or believes in. It's certainly what some Christians believe in. And you remind me a lot of myself about 10 years ago when I was arguing atheism versus theism with people. There is a much smarter, more difficult to dismiss version of theism. You know, I'll use, for example, there's an atheist Christian pastor by the name Michael Dowd who kind of opened my eyes to looking at faith and God and religion in a different way. He wrote a book called Thank God for Evolution. And, you know, the way he describes it is that there's the day language, which is kind of the rational, secular language. But then there's also the night language, which is more metaphorical. That gets him, you know, he talks about speaking in tongues when he goes out in nature, just because something springs out of him. And, you know, the benefits of these things, but he doesn't need to adopt these kind of supernatural views, the ones that you handily dismiss there, Fanny. You know, he would probably agree with you on almost everything in terms of science, evolution, consciousness, even, and that sort of thing. And then you move to Jordan Peterson,
But
who has a much more
like
nuanced view of
say,
religion, which has to do with archetypes and not pretending we know things that we don't know, right? And the idea of that we just, and I've also sensed this a little bit in you, Fanny, and it reminds me a lot of myself. And I was very dismissive of, say, tradition and and stigmas and different things like that. That is what I was about
to interject.
No, you talked about how we should normalize cuckery, right?
No, sorry.
That is not very traditional.
Speaking, I would like to just interject before we go to that. With the religion thing, I want people to understand that the secularists that I kind of appraise, or what I would like to bring, is that the point that I would think to see normal, I would like to see normalized, to have the temples, to have people praising their religions, and to not create the secular idea of that we are all humans in the end, even if people keep the traditions of going to their church, having their you know, whatever cross or
sure.
But
I think what we're trying to do now is not,
you know, freedom,
apply prescriptions to society, but prescriptions to myself and to Alex. I'm looking for guidance here, and Alex is looking for something to believe. We can't subscribe to kind of primary school atheism, which you know, goes after you know, all the straw men views of religion, that there's a sky god and he uses magic to solve things, and that the Bible is literal and all those things. Modern Christians, more sophisticated Christians, don't believe that stuff either, right? They're more like Michael Dowd or Jordan Peterson. So we have to address those arguments have appeal to me. Those ideas have appeal to me because they offer something that simple secularism and atheism don't. There's archetypes there. There's Jungian archetypes that are rooted deeply in evolution and in patterns of human behavior. And I don't want to dismiss those things, and I don't want to dismiss tradition, and I don't want to dismiss things that are stigmatized in society without understanding why they were stigmatized, why those traditions existed, how these religions evolved, and why evolution. I think why religion moved from an evolutionary process. There's a reason why, and I want to know what those reasons are before I just simply dismiss it out of hand by saying Sky God is dumb, kind of thing, right?
Look, I want to defend myself because you guys keep bringing back very bad accusations. When I say those things and make jokes, is because I think even the religious group could use their time to epistemologically play those games, exercise this, be reformed, evolve. There, of course, all the religions that still exist is why, because they were reformed. They don't Islam is about to, you know, let's see if it gets reformed one day. They still cutting people's heads off, but you know, Catholics don't do crusades anymore. They've done one time. So because why they evolved in so many positions: gay marriage, condom use, abortion, anything. Talk about, they are like, yeah, they are reforming themselves. I don't want the straw man that you guys have of anti-theists or atheists and putting those two things as one thing, is that, oh, atheists are going to be like all the religions of the other church that just want my temple to be destroyed. It's like, no, secular atheism is, you guys all can have your church, don't go into the public sphere, like it tried to be political, don't bring the church and in the political scene, but go ahead and praise and have your cross and do whatever you want. And I am a traditionalist and more of a secular that would like to not have to see so many temples, Buddhist temples destroyed, or churches burned here in Canada for different reasons, if it's religious or if it's political or whatever. I don't like that. I don't think books should be burned. That is the one thing that I think the atheists, the good atheists, I would say, secular atheists, would be what? A libertarian, because he's
would
tolerant.
you agree with this, Fanny? Would you agree that that there's a disproportionate amount of secular atheists are statists, are heavily statist? They're what I would call stateists, whereas and they value government, they worship the state and value government intervention much more than the Christian population as a whole. And what do you make? What do you use to explain that fact?
I don't know, Tim. Actually, I don't know. I don't know how. What is the people that are more atheists? They are more leftists.
Communists is what it's getting.
Yeah, they're more leftist. They're more.
But
I
would say that right? I have encountered a lot of groups that are atheists or call themselves like secular atheists, and they are like very religious in some political points or some LGBTQ positions or reparations, like stuff, different thing. And that is the thing I try to refuse. And I think we need that secular group that is attached to the libertarian principles of like, let's be tolerant. Why you left the religious groups? Oh, because they were intolerant. So why would we be intolerant towards them, be hypocritical like that, or do the same thing we don't like people to do to us? We all want to live under our decisions. Freedom, bitches. Oh, by the way, did you see free speech won? Trump is back to Twitter. Wow.
Oh, he's on Twitter?
Yesterday.
Fanny, you're falling into this trap that a lot of, not all libertarians, but a lot of libertarians and atheists, they can't distinguish between an ought and an is, or a preference and a fact. So you're saying that like we should get rid of religion and just have people using pure reason and basically the materialist sciences, but then that they would choose to do all these things. But that's not logical. Most people, given pure, like in an absence of religion, if you don't substitute that with another type of spirituality, they just become materialist atheists, which are what the communists are, and all these big, these people that become NPCs.
I think that is a slippery slope. No, I think this is saying like, look, we've seen this happening one time, and this is going to happen all the time. Look, what I'm saying here exactly to you is to be secular atheists and rationalists that understand individualism, that understand objectivism. And you're saying like, no, people cannot do that because we've never done it. It's like, yeah, I'm saying that we are the ones making the baby steps here. We are the ones bringing people to like, hey, there is an answer for religious that is rational and that is not fighting and killing everybody. You know why? Because I think like this. Just like when, just think like this. You think because if tomorrow we declare a libertarian leader takes over democratically and says like, oh, Canada now is not a united country, or like this parliamental thing, we're gonna dissolve parliament and we're gonna turn into like a United States of America of Canada, all the states are independent. Do you think just because we're not in the same country anymore, now we could be even like feel like independent country, we're gonna just fight? Or if the laws are suspended, people are gonna start killing each other? That is the thing that you're missing from the libertarian. You have to trust more people. And what you have faith. That faith is not based in evidence, but trust Trust is not something blind. I trust you.
I have to say my libertarianism is probably rooted more in distrust of people than it is of trust of people.
I don't think
it's
so.
a lack of faith in humanity
than faith. We would not be walking on the streets and doing so well as we were doing.
Well, that could be
chaos. We just think that we're in a bad situation.
If people are good, we don't need government. If people are bad, we can't trust them with the government. So either way,
everybody's wrong about God. James Lindsay, really good. Go ahead.
I think Tim would probably agree with me. Human beings, for lack of a more, like I said, this might be a linguistic problem, but if you just know the attributes of consciousness, we are fundamentally spiritual beings. If you don't give the general population a way to like,
what is to be spiritual?
It means that you have a subjective consciousness, which I actually disagree with you from a dozen different medical and scientific.
What is a subjective consciousness?
It's not a physical byproduct. It's the same. This whole physical world around us can be modeled best scientifically.
So you think your thoughts come? Let me ask you.
Consciousness is primary.
What is the
reality?
I don't even know how to ask this.
In quantum physics, you can't remove the observer from the measurement picture because there is no objective reality. That's the same thing that the Vedas have said.
I would love to go through those studies with you.
It's the same thing the psychedelic revolution says. If you've ever had,
you know that the quantic
everyone understands
physics are not.
And this is also the reason why people have subjective experience.
Do you think our bodies are subject to the quantum physics just because quantum physics is something that is within us?
Quantum physics, is the most fundamental form of physics. It's what's occurring at the smallest.
Yeah, but you understand that the laws apply different from bodies that have mass, from bodies that don't have mass.
Level, spring is literally growing out of the quantum level. So there aren't two different sets of laws. They're actually, you just have to have a unified concept of what's going on. But at the smallest level, which the macro stuff literally grows out of, that's not even there when you zoom in. It's just fuzz because it's a probability distribution. The observation, the act of observing it, causes it to become A or B. That's Schrodinger's cat. Otherwise, until it's observed, it's both because it's just pure probability. There's no. This is
then what? Then what?
Language. We're inside of a digital reality, which is why, like I said, the psychedelic revolution, quantum physics, the Vedas, all spirituality understand, and you can experience this with psychedelics. Consciousness is primary.
Why would you even think to believe your brain when you under psychedelics? My question every time I actually have this. I don't know. I should not bring this up because it's a problem I have with Cernovich. He keeps talking about this shit.
The brain is just an avatar. If you
your brain is very powerful. Look, I understand quite a lot more about the brain than you, and I hate to have to pull this card. But look, your brain is very powerful, Alex. It's true. Your brain can cause yourself hallucinations, and we actually know there are some psychedelics. Wow, that actually cause you hallucinations. Why would you ever trust your brain more when you under psychedelics than when you're sober? Just think hard about that and answer me.
Okay, I'll give you a very direct answer because your subjective internal experience is more than what's happening in the brain.
Bullshit! No.
If you have an experience,
actually talking Deepak Chopra here.
Direct answer you can possibly have. To say no, my subjective experiences are not accounted for is ridiculous. But the other thing is I'll give you some background. When I started Freebird, I was at the initial Jordan Peterson rally because I'd been invited by the head of the Secular Alliance because I'd given a talk there on the nature of consciousness, which received a huge amount of endorsements from scientists. So not to pull rank, but I know way more about this than you do because I've been specialized in this.
No, woo-woo obscurance.
I can show you the physics papers, and I can.
Oh my gosh, Alex! Of course, you can believe anything you want. There's the Deepak Chopra there to prove this.
If you're convinced,
famous and popular,
byproduct of a physical brain, and you're convinced of it, you're not going to look at all of the counter.
Look, I don't want to convince you anything.
But you can't until you see all the evidence. That's what I'm saying. I'm not being closed-minded. I have a huge amount of evidence. If you're just dismissing that out of hand, that's fine. But I
know there's evidence for this. I've seen Deepak Chopra talking about all this garbage. It's amazing.
Materialism, all of that.
It's called the new apologetics. They love playing with with
you have like
scientific terms that most of people don't understand. You can actually, you go to evangelical church and they do the same thing with different levels of knowledge that, or they
the thing
have.
with religion is that that's external, and that's
They
someone
should
else
get a Nobel Prize for that.
With psychedelics, or a dissociative like ketamine, you can experience this. And why you would trust your own subjective experience over a materialist theory of what a brain is because it's your own consciousness directly. It's not coming from a priest. It's coming from you internally directly, which is different states of subjective.
It's coming from a drug. We know you're gonna fucking flip and have hallucinations.
What do you think is happening when you're under those experiences?
It's a substance. We know that effect is gonna happen. You're gonna feel. Now you you want to translate that into something spiritual. Of course, this has always happened.
Itself is valid.
Back there in the natives, they would give the teas and get woohoo. This is spiritual. No,
I'm gonna try to be I'm gonna try to mediate here. Let me try to play mediator here, because I see value to both sides. I love the argument.
An interview for team. Let's go back. Team.
Well, okay. So
gun control.
All right.
Let them talk. Just let them talk.
Let's talk about something we agree.
Okay. There is, I think there's huge value to psychedelics in a lot of ways, right? So I know, Gabor Mate, for example, has cured heroin addiction. He has something like a 50 to 75% cure rate after one ayahuasca trip. Now, is it because people are seeing some version of reality or spiritual realm or quantum realm? I don't know, but they are coming. What is occurring in those psychedelic experiences is that they are able to see themselves differently through a different lens. They're able to engage what psychologists call the inner observer, right? The ability to look at yourself, and people who are engaged in negative patterns of behavior and addictions and different things like that, they're almost like vampires. They can't see themselves in a mirror. They can't self-reflect.
So people with
right?
with dysmorphisms and dysphorias that then take a natural substance coming from a natural thing that grows on the floor, just like many medical shit that we use will become one day a pill, or oh no, it's already a pill. So it's medicine. It's just not completely accepted.
Now, but here's the thing. Here's my point: is that you can't. I mean, that is certainly something I would describe as spiritual healing in some sense, right? In if you can kick a heroin addiction by the use of psychedelics, and that's something that is happening in both your subjective experience, the way you experience the world, the way you think about it, and also objectively, in that observers, independent of you, can observe that you are behaving in a different way. The one thing where I think we have to be careful, about simply saying that we have to, I think there's a delusion by a lot of atheists and secularists and rationalists, like I am, that we see the lens through a perfect lens. We see the world through a perfect lens of rationality, right? And we know, for example, that experience is largely subjective, in that and that's why we kind of need the scientific process, because we need to verify this independently by other observers and other vectors. And we know that if I think and talk in a different language, I have sometimes a different worldview, because some other languages see the world, allow you to see the world in a different way, just because of the way you talk about it, right? So words themselves, as units of passing information, are not precise. They are granular in some sense. And maybe eventually we'll get to a place, maybe with Elon Musk's Neuralink, where we can, directly link into our thoughts and get more high fidelity communication, that will be able to get more precise with language. But the reality of the matter is, we're speaking at a very low resolution. We're using a very low resolution technology in terms of language to describe the world, and it's not perfectly aligned up with reality. We speak in metaphors and all sorts of things. That this is why communication is so difficult, and why there's so many different worldviews, probably. But to me, religion is, in one sense, part with that language. Even despite it being low resolution, is hugely beneficial. Humanity has benefited hugely, even though it's not precisely aligned with reality, even though it's not, it's very low resolution, it's still some resolution. And I look at religion in kind of the same way, or at least faith, and having a pattern of beliefs that you subscribe to. It may be a lower resolution than, but it's still helpful. And so if, for some minds, I think it is really helpful to have that. Yeah. And certainly for some minds, we know that if they disabuse themselves of that, they adopt another pattern of beliefs that's low resolution. The state is all powerful. The committee of virtue from whence all things good come, and we need to worship it and have it solve all our problems. That is an extremely harmful view. So, I think we look at the world through these different resolutions. And so I don't want to dismiss religion or language any more than, I want to dismiss psychedelics. I think all of these things have their useful place. And I think wisdom comes from learning the right place to apply it, and learning how to evaluate it from to protect yourself from the harmful side of those things as well.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, I think I would agree too, because definitely we should use the things. We should not stop ourselves, the natural evolution, because we don't know. That is actually one of my points against religions, when I think that I try to exercise that. It's like, if there was no religion before, maybe would have worked with stem cells, maybe would be living longer by now, maybe would be more evolved in so many levels of our society. And I see that we still have this last leg that cannot let it go of it. But it's okay, because one day we reach there, and then it will be like super fast then, and the way that we can just be secular is not to get rid of religions, is to keep the religions where they should be, in the private level. You want to pray everything, go ahead. Maybe there is a public level that has to have a limitation, because maybe we don't want the guys,
right? But this comes back to that, and this is the struggle. I have as a libertarian activist and libertarian leader, is like, okay, the difficulty in disabusing people of the most harmful religion, right? Statism. That's essentially what the work of a libertarian and maybe an objectivist is. It's shifting the culture. But the part of the problem is that it's as appealing as atheism, in that it tells people what not to believe, but it doesn't offer them something it's difficult to find an aspirational aspect to point them towards, right? And so that's,
well, when I think, don't give attention to religions,
the important message here is that we really need to do some work on that aspirational message if we want to shift culture, if we want to be more influential and persuasive. It's not enough to say, well, belief in God is stupid for X, Y, and Z reason, and belief in the state is stupid for X, Y, and Z reason.
No, I don't think it's a status.
I know, but this is what a lot of people hear, and this is what, and I'm pointing the finger at myself here, Fanny.
This is like, look, if you don't go 1 hour or whatever many hours you don't go to church a week, what would you do? For example, let's talk about other things. People that have addictions. You spend whatever hours drinking, fapping, let's say. Fapping, one of a lot of talk about this. What you're going to do when you're not fapping? Is that fapping change your life? No, you change your life. You change your habits. You take 1 hour fapping every day, and then you go to the gym, and then you get muscles. You feel better. Your testosterone goes up. Now you don't go to church. What you going to do? Oh my gosh, I'm lost. I don't have values. I lost all my morals. No. You work on yourself, go to the gym,
yes, Fanny, and I can tell you this from personal experience. Yes, when I lost my faith, I was a lost man. Like, I had no direction. I did not know what to do. I didn't know what to aim at. It's very disconcerting, and so we need to do a better job. And I think you've offered some great suggestions there in terms, and this is why Peterson's so popular. I think in part is because he talks about, the flip side of liberty is personal responsibility. Can't have freedom without discipline, right? And so it's about taking responsibility, cleaning your room, going to the gym, doing all these things. And so those are, I think the stories that we need to start telling more. Oh, okay. What is, people have asked me, okay, what do we do about the Ukraine conflict? And I said, okay, Pete, are you talking about you and I? Like, what are you and I going to do? When you use the word we, are we talking about like give me a plan. Like, I'm not ready to ship. My boys and I aren't ready to ship out just yet. Like, give me a plan. Are you talking about creating a crowdsource to assassinate Putin? I might donate to that. Are you talking about taking immigrants into our own home and giving them shelter to protect them? Yeah, I'm down for that. Who's this we we're talking about, Pete? And of course, he's never talking about personal responsibility here. He's not talking about me. What can I do? He's talking about, what are those people over there? Well, do you think those guys over there who aren't us should go kill and die for this cause, be based on our opinion, like 4,000 miles away from whatever's going on? You know, and so what I'm trying to do now is hone a method of persuasion and communicating, where I try to get people out of this status paradigm and thinking about themselves and what they can actually do about the problem that most vexes them in the world. Okay, what can you and I do, Pete? Like, let's stop stop armchair quarterbacking what other people should do and start talking about making actual plans here. If you're serious about this, if you think this is a serious problem, let's do something about it. But, you know, let's have show me that it's going to have some chance of success, and show me that it's going to have some benefit, and that I'm not going to end up just being a bloody body lying on a battlefield or something, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, minimum wage, let's say. I think there should be a minimum wage. Oh, okay. Well, have you started a business and paid people $15, $20 an hour, or whatever you think the minimum wage is? Oh, why haven't you done that? Why don't we do that? Why don't we start a business and pay people what you think they should be done? You know, so let's actually be the solution here to the problem. And that puts people right off. And I think it's what I found to be somewhat effective. But I think, again,
maybe we should
getting away from why the minimum wage is bad, and talking about how can you actually solve that yourself? How can you solve the problem of low wages yourself? What can you actually do about it without getting this giant corporation that uses violence to solve problems involved? Do we really need to ask a criminal gang to solve this problem for us? How about you and I try to figure out how to solve this thing that vexes you? And that switches people into, you know, instead of being a back and forth about my arguments, your arguments, it switches them into solution mode and gives them something a little bit more aspirational. So that's one of the ways I'm trying to do it. But again, that comes from this recognition that libertarianism and atheism for so long has talked about how stupid it is to believe X, Y, and Z. And it's never been aspirational. It's never been what we should focus on, what we should believe in, what direction should we go now that we know that
I think they didn't have a chance yet. We kind of like abandoning the fight before we ever got to even be there, you know, like to have the audience. Libertarianism is like, oh, we are not popular. And when we now be giving those baby steps trying to come out, what happens here in Canada? Oh, PPC, Libertarian Party, you guys don't have a representativity. You guys don't have support enough to be even invited for the debates.
And the shameful thing is that Justin Trudeau has done more to advance our libertarian cause than I or Bernier could ever take credit for in a lot of ways. You know,
he did in a harmful way, though.
He did, of course,
according to the non-aggression principle.
And I don't know if you really.
But I agree. Right now is an opportune time. I mean, people have never been more disenfranchised and skeptical of the government than they are right now. And you know, we see conservatives turn on the police, and you know, all these sacred cows being slaughtered right now. And so now the danger is, what do they replace this belief with, right? What do they've had their faith in the state shook. Now we have to step in there and give them something meaty to replace that.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, is there
bank accounts now, so we have to live by example, right? And actually take action and live like more self-sustainably and build networks.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
think we're still going to be just forced to be isolated inside the country because we don't really have freedom to get out? You know, it's not something that is feasible to just like, fuck this, I don't agree, I'm leaving. And they're like, you can't leave either. You don't have vaccine passport. Who said you're leaving?
Yeah,
you're going to walk out of here?
Now I'm very anti-status now. After that whole vaccine incident, changed me very much. Yeah, terrified me actually. I'm just waiting for them to eventually come after. Freebird Media for just being in Ottawa and all this stuff. So it's only, I assume it's a matter of time before they come for my bank account at some point.
Jeez, yeah, it's
I
scary.
would
It's
say
frightening.
that did you guys, you team or you Alex, have felt any effects of the not the freezing the accounts, but with the emergency calls, and many banks got like to run out of money because people trying to withdraw, and they actually put limits, daily limits. So I actually got surprised not being able to withdraw on one of the weekends because there was like this daily limit new in the bank. And I was like, look, it's gonna cause a bunch of problem to normal people, even people that are not actually involved to the protest at all, just general population.
Yeah, I think at this point, we have to assume that there's absolutely nothing we can do to change the course of the state or history necessarily on the grand scale. And it becomes incumbent on us to recognize that our movements might not work, probably won't even work. And so what do we do knowing that apocalypse is coming and things are going to crumble down around us? How can we protect ourselves? And so again, it all comes back to personal responsibility, which, I think libertarians need to focus on now more than ever.
Yeah. You think freedom is the one core principle that unites us and we should all overlook? That's why sometimes I say, like, I think the protest should be more secular so they can bring more people to and be more for freedom,
Yeah.
I think more people are going to vote Libertarian or PPC now for sure. Those will be two options that people wrestle with.
Well, I think, Pierre Poilievre
gets... Party is strong. Where's the Libertarian Party strong, have candidates and people
it's the strongest in Ontario and BC because they have provincial Libertarian parties there. So those guys are active quite a lot more. Very difficult to create a network across the province, or across the country. The PPC did a great job. I mean, Maxime Bernier with his MP pension plus his 6-figure salary from the party. Yeah, he was able to drum up support right across the country, get EDAs installed. And so the Libertarian Party is going to need a lot of help, I think, doing those sorts of things. I think it's going to be interesting this next election because Pierre Poilievre is saying all the right things on the economy to the conservative and genuine most Canadians' ears. I think a lot of people are going to flip to him. The economy's going shitting the bed, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see the PPC bleed a lot of support to the Conservatives going forward. And, of course, I could never vote for any party other than the Libertarian Party because I know what its principles are. I know what it's going to be trying to do when it gets in government. I don't trust Bernier. I don't trust, and I'm like a lot of his policies don't make. I'm not happy with, so for example, his climate change policy, there's no climate catastrophe, therefore we don't need government intervention. And I would prefer it to say something like, even if climate catastrophe is coming, we need liberty. Like government is not going to solve a climate catastrophe, right? That's the kind of party the Libertarian Party is. It says whatever your problem is, government is not the answer. And I think the PPC goes too far and says we need to use the government to bend culture, to control things like immigration, which comes back to the cultural argument. And to, they're not as restrained when it comes to foreign policy. They're, so they have a lot of kind of conservative ways that they might want to be tempted to use the state. So I don't trust them as much as the Libertarian Party. So I don't really get the point of the PPC. Is it to be offer a libertarian alternative? Well, why didn't you take my spot as leader of the Libertarian Party when I offered it to you, and taking that baton and like running with it? And instead he formed this other party that's somewhere in between conservatives. Is it to try to like win an election? Because if you're trying to do that, stay in the Conservative Party. You'd be leader by now, and try to go that way. But so I'm not really sure what the point is, other than to line Bernier's pockets, maybe. But
well, I don't trust you as a politician over Bernier because he's a career politician, whereas you're a regular citizen that just happens to be involved. So intuitively, I support the PPC, but I'm always fully aware that Bernier might have even been astroturfing the whole thing from the beginning, so they can.
I kind of love Bernier. I'll have to defend him.
But no,
No, and it's like, look, guys,
Right.
I'm just saying, because I have had conversations with Bernie out of the cameras when I went to see him in Chilliwack, that he was doing the PPC run. I know personally PPC support, like candidates here locally, have helped me in this hard moment situation with the vaccine passports that they could not get a job. And
Yeah,
I've talked
PPC
to Bernie
candidates
out
are
of
all
the
great, and Bernie is
he
good in a
is a
lot of ways
very
too. But
libertarian by principles, okay? But definitely one thing I have to defend him, and it's not something negative that we should hold against him. He plays the cards of politics. He needs to be more conservative to get the support of the people. So it's like he's a Rothbardian. He's like talking to
well,
me like
that's
reading the
my point
books.
with
So
him.
you
That's
kind of
why
like,
I don't get the
so
point.
it's
It's
not
like
that
if
he's
you're going to be
it's
pragmatic,
not that he's a
just join the
liar or
Conservative Party.
grifter. Where are you going to get the support?
Well, he is a liar because he
When
lied to
you're a
me personally.
libertarian,
So.
look, when you're a libertarian, if there's only left or right to go, you know the left will not accept you to not wear the mask.
Yeah,
but
and
the
I'm
right
not
will be
opposed
okay,
to pragmatic
and
politics.
that's the thing.
You know, I've considered even jumping into pragmatic politics and maybe even running as a UCP candidate here in Alberta. And I recognize it's now a different game. My game as Libertarian Party leader was try to shift culture. My game as a pragmatic politician would be to try to get into the institutions of power and make some kind of marginal changes if I could. I'm not naive enough to think that that's a better option than trying to shift culture, but it might be worth a shot, and there might be some opportunity. And this is where I say I don't get what Bernier is trying to do. Is he trying to be a pragmatic politician? If that's true, why not stay in the Conservative Party? Is he trying to be a cultural shifter? If that's true, why not adopt a principle and follow through on your deal with me to be the leader of the Libertarian Party? Instead of ghosting your boy here.
I agree with you. I would love to see you guys together. Look, I have to agree completely with him more because of the point of you guys should just get together and support each other, because all libertarian, be Libertarian Party by name, okay?
Yeah,
for sure.
And principle.
The one thing that I think maybe is not being pragmatic is to be practical, is to be like, where can I actually can they change? No, look, it's not being changed.
What's moral is ethical.
Look, let me finish. When I told you that I would love to see full anarchism, but I understand that we can't reach that right now. Imagine if I try to really run as full anarchist, I will never have support. So what am I going to do? I was like, I can't tell people like vote for me. And
okay, but what are you going to do? Are you going to? Is your goal to get elected, or is your goal to make change?
I would love to.
Is your goal more liberty?
No, it's definitely to make change. But look, I know I can't.
So how are you going to do that as a pragmatic politician?
It's unachievable to convince. Look, if I come to you, or not to you might get your vote. But if I come
but
to
what is your vote? What is voting going to do?
Today,
Fanny, what is voting going to do? What is you getting a seat going to do? What can you do?
Because if people support me, that makes look.
Now what can you do? Okay, let's say everyone supports you.
I understand what you're saying.
You're
saying like, look, nobody's being honest. So maybe we could have people there that are pro this, pro that, or whatever. Okay.
You can't be completely honest though, right? You have to lie a little bit. You have to hide your light under a bush a little bit, right? You have to deceive a little bit if you want to get elected. You can't go radical.
My gosh, let me say what I'm saying is that if I go out there and ask for the vote as even PPC, or go I'm gonna affiliate to the Libertarian Party and go knock on my neighbor's door and say like, look, what I really want, if you go to read the Libertarian, is that I want all the drugs legalized. I want no government to do with marriage status. I want no government to do to controlling people's guns. They can, as soon as they register, it's fine, go ahead. I don't want the government to ban abortion. I want the government to let people get their abortion with their money.
You're not going to get in, Fanny.
You're not going to get votes.
You see?
Yeah.
So,
but my point is, if you don't say that stuff and you get in,
there and do this just to make people think about those things? Do you think
that's literally the only thing that's going to work? That's the only thing that's going to work, in my opinion. I don't think.
Should I be a political evangelical?
Yes.
I'm going to start knocking people's door for
that's
the
what you should do.
Party, though.
do it. I mean, you're not going to get votes. But that's literally the work that needs to get done, right? You need to take unpopular positions and popularize them as
Why
best you
do
can.
you
And
think there's
that's
only
going to be
4
difficult to
people
do.
watching? Look, no, this
Yeah.
is actually my position. I'm a fucking base. I'm a fucking principled. That's why I'm working so hard in the fucking channel, interviewing people, talking about how we can talk civilly, disagree like this, which is amazing. And this is the future that I would love to see.
Fanny, you got to let us talk though, so that we can actually disagree.
No, sorry.
So I hear
You
you.
always shame me.
No, don't worry. Tim's making good points though. I pretty much agree with like everything you're saying. With Bernier, did he ghost you? I'm curious there. What happened? Because I remember the news when you were trying to talk to him. He ghosts a lot of people, so I'm curious what happened there.
Right. So I'll just give you our backstory a little bit. I mean, for when Harper resigned, we headhunted Bernier. We said what the Libertarian Party needs is a libertarian-leaning Conservative Party leader. And we said Bernier is saying the right noises, and at least economically, he's fairly libertarian-leaning. And what we want to do is we want to run enough candidates, get on that debate stage, and we get on that debate stage, and what happens is we would make Bernier look like a moderate on that debate stage because of our radical ideas, right? We would look like the extremists. And then because part of the problem is there's no, the Green Party and the NDP pulls everyone to the left, right? Up there, they shift the Overton window leftwards so that even conservatives have to have some kind of climate change policy or, social programs and different things like that. So that the idea was get Bernier installed as Conservative Party leader, lend him some support. Some of our guys went over there to support his campaign. We flew him out to Western Canada, connected him with people that we thought would support him, that there would be a lot of Western sentiment that would support him in his leadership run. And shortly after that visit to Calgary and our tour and our interactions, he threw his name in the running, and he almost won. And then when he didn't win, I immediately put out a video saying, hey, sorry about your loss. We would love to have you as party leader. Here, I'll step down and offer my position to you. I mean, of course, we'd have to have a runoff, but you would win no problem, given your stature, and you would elevate liberty to the next level in Canada. Like, you could be Canada's Ron Paul. You could talk about legalizing drugs. You could talk about ending income tax. You could talk about ending foreign intervention. You could do all the things Ron Paul did and really bring this to the forefront. And I put out a public video. I reached out to him. I talked to him several times over that year, and he kept saying, oh, Tim, I think I can make some difference here, and I can get my liberty platform in there. And over that year, he became more and more disillusioned with the idea that he could do that. And to the point where him and I were supposed to debate whether at our Libertarian Party convention, whether the Conservative Party or the Libertarian Party was going to be the best avenue for advancing liberty in Canada. And he called me up at the last minute and said, Tim, I can't in good conscience debate you because I don't think I support my side of the argument anymore. And I'm like, that's wonderful, Max. I'm glad to hear that. Listen, if you decide to pull the pin on the Conservative Party, my offer still stands. I still would love for you to take over the reins of the Libertarian Party, take my spot, and really elevate this thing. We need a strong, a guy with your profile and your star power to take us to the next level. And he's very polite. He's a nice guy. Oh yes, well, thank you so much, and something to think about. And then I see him go on Twitter, and he starts putting out tweets that distance himself from the Conservative Party, right? And I could see right away what he was doing. He could have put out things like taxation is theft, legalize all the drugs, end foreign interventionist wars, conservative supported Bill C-51, or like all these things that libertarians and signaled that, and he still would have got kicked out of caucus. But instead, he went down this other rabbit hole of what was popular at the time, populism. Okay. Anti-immigration, cultural, multicultural, all these things. And those are important issues. I agree with, but, I could see what he was doing. He was setting himself up as a populist alternative to, get in front of this movement that was occurring with the alt-right in the US and to some extent in Canada, and become Canada's version of Trump. So he went from Libertarian Max during the Conservative leadership race, where he was in opposition to Kelly Leach's immigration limits and called her basically the Trump policy, right? Now he's basically adopting her policy. And this is something, you know, in retrospect, if you look back, again, Max is a pragmatic politician. He's done this throughout his career. He was a separatist in the 90s. He was a status quo conservative in the 2000s. He became, you know, and then he became Libertarian Max, and then he became Populist Max. So he does what he needs to do to get in front of the parade, that what's going to serve Max. And so I phoned him when he formed this new party, the PPC, and I congratulated him, and I said, you know, I'm disappointed you didn't do your thing. And he says, well, you're doing some important work, and you know, like, keep at it. You know, he's encouraging. Then Derek Fildebrink got a hold of me and said, why aren't you guys working together? Like, why isn't the party merged? And he reached out to Bernier and said, why aren't you merging parties? And then they reached out to me and said, well, because Bernier was having problems with fundraising at the time. He couldn't issue tax receipts because they weren't an official party yet. Until they actually ran someone in a by-election, they couldn't issue a tax refund. And there's a substantial tax refund you get if you donate $400 to a political party in Canada. You get $300 back. You get a 75% refund. So wow. when you have that power, you can do a lot of fundraising. But he didn't have that power yet, whereas we did. So he reached out to me, and I should have clued in. The first thing he asked me was, how is the party incorporated? What are the articles of incorporation? Who do they list as the board of directors? All these things, right? I'm like, well, I don't know. We're a political party with Elections Canada. I'm not aware. Like, we're just a political party. I mean, we have our board, but no, he needed to know, are you a for-profit, non-profit, charity? How are you incorporated? And I thought that was odd. Yeah. So I'm like, well, I'll look into it. We couldn't find any articles of incorporation. It turns out we were not a corporation with that's registered with the government as a corporation. We are just a political party registered with Elections Canada. But apparently what happens is all these main political parties, what they do is they have, like, there's the Conservative Fund and the Liberal Party Fund and different things like that, right? So there's a corporation that does all the fundraising, and so the Conservative Fund, for the long time after Harper stepped down, he was the chair of it, and he had his cronies around him, basically controlling all the funds for the party, how the fundraising occurs. That all occurs through this corporation. And then there's the part of the party that's connected to Elections Canada, right? So I thought I couldn't figure out why he was so intent on figuring this out. And we finally figured out it wasn't incorporated. So, and you know, I talked about, look, here's what I have to do, Max. I have to convince 7/8 of my members to get on board with this merge. I think we can. I think we can keep your name. And as long as you agree that we can keep our constitution and stuff like that, I think the party members, they won't be happy about the name change because PPC sounds a little bit commie, but I think I can convince them, as long as we have a libertarian DNA and a strict constitution that we have, that we're going to be able to make this work. And he says, okay, I'll get back to you next week. Never got back to me next week. So by this time I'd already started the wheels in motion to get our party merged, to drum up support for this merger. And he was getting all sorts of PPC membership because of this. We lost, you know, at least half of our executive to the PPC, because Bernier was offering all these incentives to get on sweet spots in the party if you jumped over. So our party was basically crumbling because of this merger. And then he ghosts me. And he told, I later found out from one of his aides, that was his kind of aide de camp at the time, that we got what we wanted from the Libertarian Party, right? So I felt like I'd been played. It was a Machiavellian move. I felt like he, you know, if you look, you can look this up, the articles of incorporation for the PPC. I went afterwards and looked it up. And there's basically three people that own the PPC. There's Max Bernier, his lawyer, and his right-hand man, who's been his right-hand man for 2 decades, Martin Mass. These are the guys that own it. If the PPC ever dissolved, all those funds would be theirs. And so I have to believe that part of what killed it is the fact that he would have to figure out how to incorporate the Libertarian Party where he would be an owner of it or something.
That is really disheartening to hear, because I didn't know about any of this, and that just sucks, because I didn't even I'll be honest, I was ignorant. I didn't even realize they could incorporate like that, or like, now I just see this huge business angle of this. And I do believe, I'll be honest with you, I do think that they're very Machiavellian. I think they totally.
Sorry, but I would not make any conclusion out of the. I understand what you told me, what you just told us, team. But it seems to be a problem with timing, and maybe do you think it could be just financial, that in the meantime that he was waiting for you to like call him, he actually raised quite a lot of money, and then he looked back and
Well, I
say,
think he
maybe I
changed
don't
his
want
mind.
to,
I
maybe I
think
don't
he
want to
was
fuse with the Libertarian Party because maybe Libertarian Party would not have funds to end.
sure.
You know, becomes like a
I,
business, like a company. Because
yeah, there
just saying.
are some good reasons why he would do, you know, and I could see why he would want to stay away from a democratic kind of people's party. Let's say, like, our party was run by the people. I mean, I was elected as leader. I don't own the party. There's a board that's in charge. You know, I answer to them. I can be ousted as leader at any time. Someone can take a run at it. I could understand why you wouldn't want all those things in there, especially if you're trying to build up a movement. I mean, there's some values to being a sole proprietor of your organization rather than kind of a shareholder organization, right? And that's kind of what I think Max preferred. And there's probably good strategic reasons for that. But at the same time, I felt betrayed. I felt undermined. I felt like I put my trust in this guy. And I felt like I had blinders on a lot of the time, and I didn't see the signs that were right there. The fact that he had changed his stripes so many times, that he had been pragmatic, all these things should have warned me away from even agreeing to look at a merge with him. But I was eager to hand over the reins to him. I wanted out because it's a hard business when you're a volunteer. You're doing this. You've killed your career. You've cashed in your pension to try to do some good. And you're constantly getting stabbed in the back by people close to you because they see your popularity and the success you're having, and they want to tag onto that and bring you down and take your place. I was ready to get out of the game and hand it over to a guy who was good at that. So I had my blinders up, and so I take, you know, as much accountability as anyone for even entertaining this. But I was kind of looking for a way out, and I honestly thought it would be the best thing for Liberty to have Maxime Bernier leading a Libertarian Party in Canada and saying libertarian things. And so, you know, I was looking forward to that, but it didn't happen. And so, you know, there you go. I'm a little bit bitter, I guess, a little bit, still those feelings of
I would
betrayal
love
linger.
to
So
talk a bit more and touch Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but we were
sure.
set to do 1 hour only, and we are
Yeah.
close to 3. I'm so sorry, team.
We're hitting Rogan time limits here.
Thanks for talking to us. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry we ran so long.
No, I enjoy this. Anytime I'm happy to chat with
lovely.
you. So
these are enjoyable conversations. That story with me too. Sorry to hear about that. Now I have to sit back and do some thinking on the PPC. But I sympathize with you because I know what it's like. They're always trying to use people at the grassroots level all the time. So I know how it is.
Yeah, it is. It was a lesson to me in how these things work and how pragmatic politics works and stuff like that. And again, it lends to me the idea that, look, there's two ways you can think of to achieve liberty. One is to get the ring of power, right? To get into government. And to do that, you have to reflect culture. You have to, you have to say the things that are going to be popular, that are going to get you elected. And then you basically handcuff yourself by the same things you're saying, the weak things you're saying, or the lies you're saying, or whatever. You're not going to be, even if your true intent is pure libertarianism like mine, you're not going to be able to get your agenda done, right? The other avenue is you try to shift culture, and you don't do that by soft peddling the truth. You only get incremental improvements in liberty by being a radical. This is why the left is winning right now, is because they're radicals. It's not the Justin Trudeaus and even the Elizabeth Mays or the Jagmeet Singhs that are controlling the Overton window. It's the radical left. It's the extremists. It's the people that are saying no compromise. This is our message. And so we need that same thing on the political stage, in the culture wars, saying no compromise here. We will not compromise liberty one bit. And that means, even though it's really unpopular, legalize it all. And, end the income tax and end this and end that.
But I will have to defend myself.
And then we get incremental improvement in the direction we want, rather than incremental destruction in the direction the left wants. So that's the method that I think is most pragmatic, is the least naive. And I think the most naive and least pragmatic is doing all the things you need to do to get elected, and then getting elected and trying to do things in office. That has not worked. That has been demonstrably a failure, I
Yeah,
think. So
no, I'll have to defend myself in this position on the, like, look, what we have seen here in the past, for example, the provincial elections, is that for this area here, we had a PPC candidate. And the one thing that I've been supporting financially, PPC, like, oh my gosh, got to get my account frozen. Support PPC financially, because there was, and even like have the sticker on my car, PPC, vote PPC, made signs during the freedom convoy for PPC, because it was the only one choice from mask mandates. If you voted any other one, left or right, doesn't matter. Not going to talk about the candidates. It would be yes, mask mandates. The only option, no mask mandates, was the PPC, and there's no PPC everywhere. So when I found out there is a candidate here, as no, we need to support, because it's the one, like I said, it's the baby step towards freedom when you don't have any other thing. I think that, and that's what I would like. People, if you guys or want to support Libertarian Party team, will tell us here how to support, how to get together with the community if you have some community in your area. And we're gonna put the links on the videos here on the description later.
Yeah, well,
because I think
description, Tim.
You know what I feel? The left and right in United States as well are not for mask or not for freedom when it comes to mask mandates, COVID passports. Most of them are authoritarian. And that's what we started over when we talk about the political compass. Imagine that
hour mark, Fanny. We
people don't have that third option. So, team, how people can support the Libertarian Party?
Sure. Go to libertarian.ca, join as a member. It's very easy to get involved too if you want a position as where you're a heavy influencer. It's not even that hard to become leader. You just gain a little bit of popularity and you take a run at the leader and show up to convention with some supporters and you got a good shot of even becoming the leader. So it's very easy to get involved and have a very influential position in the party, and put in you get out of it as much as you put into it, right? And so go to libertarian.ca and sign up and help them out. I wish I could help them out more, but what's that?
I would love to become a politician, but after after OnlyFans and all the shit and so many unpopular opinions, like you said,
that increases your libertarian cred, I think, for a lot of people, so
it does give you cred, Fanny. Don't worry. All right, Tim, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you talking to us. Always enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Enjoyable.
Take care.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you very much, everybody who tuned in and enjoyed the show, which went a little longer, but I hope you guys enjoyed this civil disagreement conversation, and we're going to be here again and again. See you guys next time. Let me see. Tons of comments here. I'm so sorry we couldn't go over everything. Join our Discord, and we're going to book some conversations for the weekends with the community. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody. And Tim, of course, just jump off. See you, bye.